Chapter 154. If Mao III observed Yin Qiue's eyes carefully, he would find them extremely cold and cruel. At this moment, Shaoqing directly lit a candle for Mao III. Others didn't know, but Shaoqing was very clear. Although Yin Qiue was gentle in front of her, he was actually very cruel. He was also very vengeful. Mao III had offended Yin Qiue so many times. If he didn't die miserably, Shaoqing would change her surname. After walking back, Shaoqing deliberately said kindly, "There are a lot of small flying insects in the forest at night, such as mosquitoes. Once they bite someone, the person will be swollen and filled with pus. If it's serious, the person will even die. We don't have a tent, so we must be careful at night." Mao III didn't care about mosquitoes and flies, but he knew that Shaoqing and Yin Qiue had stayed in the forest for a long time. If they dared to say that, they must have a reason. He hastily ordered his subordinates. As for whether his subordinates would listen to him, he couldn't do anything about it. Would they listen to him? Who would believe that mosquitoes could kill people? However, Shaoqing insisted that they didn't believe it. At night, they left a few people to keep watch and went asleep. Shaoqing and Yin Qiue were special, so they naturally didn't need to keep watch. They slept until dawn. The next morning, they were awakened by a scream. Shaoqing lazily got up. She rubbed her eyes and looked at the source of the scream. It was a young man. His face was pale as if he had seen a ghost. There was a person lying motionless by his feet. Mao III was squatting by the side and checking with a serious expression. Shaoqing and Yin Qiue walked over. The man was lying on the ground and looked like he was asleep. However, he was no longer breathing. There was a lump on his face and pus was flowing out. It seemed that he had been bitten by a mosquito. However, no one believed that it was a fatal wound. Mao III's face became more and more pale. He directly took off all the clothes of the man on the ground and checked for any other wounds. He had to admit that the man was probably bitten to death by a mosquito, but there were so many people around, and a few of them had been bitten by mosquitoes, but they were all fine. Why was he the only one who died? Mao San's face was as ugly as the bottom of a pot. After a while, he said, "Bury him." The other people's faces were pale. They carried the man to the side and prepared to dig a hole to bury him. Mao Laosan stood up and looked at Shaoqing and Yin Qiue. "Almost all of my brothers were bitten. Why are you two fine?" Shaoqing's eyes turned cold. "Boss Mao, are you suspecting that we did something?" Mao San said calmly, "Didn't something happen? I lost a brother, so I have to investigate." Shaoqing sneered, "I was the one who told you that there are mosquitoes in the jungle and they bite people. It's your people who didn't take precautions. What does it have to do with us? The reason why I asked is that you two have been in the jungle for a long time. You are more familiar with everything than me. It's naturally easier for you to do something. Of course, I'm not saying that you two did something. It's just an example." Mao San said with a fake smile, "Now it seems that you two didn't do anything. But you two must have a way to resist or prevent those insects from getting close to you." Yin Qiue also replied with a fake smile, "It's really a coincidence that we weren't bitten. We either did something or have a way to resist the insects. Boss Mao is so sure, but why don't I know about it?" Mao San said with a gloomy face, "It's fine if you two don't want to say it. I don't want to force you. I just don't want any more brothers to die for no reason." Chapter 155. Shaoqing faintly said, "We once encountered a kind of white spider in the jungle and were bitten by it. This kind of spider is the natural enemy of many insects in the jungle. Our blood still has a bit of the spider's smell, so no insects will bite me." "I see." Mao San was a little disappointed, but he didn't know that Shaoqing was just making things up. She didn't encounter any white spiders, and even if she did, what kind of spider could get close to her and bite her? They had just entered the forest and lost one of their brothers. The morale of Mao San's team was a little low. Mao San gave them a speech to encourage them, and everyone went on their way. Yin Qiue, who was leading the way, winked at Shaoqing with a teasing look on her face. How could a mosquito bite a person to death? Unless there were dozens or hundreds of them biting the same person. Yin Qiue was the one who did it behind the scenes. If someone were to come and dissect the buried corpse, they would find that his internal organs had been shattered. Yin Qiue controlled the air and crushed most of his internal organs. However, Mao San did not suspect this, so he did not do a deep examination. As they continued to move forward, Xiaoqing quietly planted the seeds of daughter in several people's bodies. She wanted to slowly cripple Mao San's helpers and then kill him. It was not that she was cruel and wanted to cripple Mao San's helpers one by one, and then let him die in endless fear. If she did not do it, she and Yin Qiwei would be injured. Of course, Xiaoqing was sure that Yin Qiwei was thinking of the above. He wanted to torture Mao San a few more times. The second person who died soon appeared, because they encountered danger the next day. Xiaoqing made up a type of spider, and they really encountered it. The spider was the size of a fist, and its whole body was white. Only the hair on its claws was black. The silk it spat out formed a web, and some of the web had white bones. Although it was only a piece of bone, it was certain that it was a human leg bone. Even humans had become its food. It could be seen how cruel this spider was. What was even more frightening was that when it encountered an enemy, the large spider would instantly discharge a pile of small red spiders from its lower body. The color of the small spiders was as bright as blood, and it was obvious that they were highly poisonous. At first, it was one of Mao San's men who discovered it. He went behind a tree to relieve himself. Just as he undid his belt, a white jade-like spider suddenly appeared in front of him. Before he could react, his face was covered in spider silk. Then, he felt a sharp pain on his neck and could not get up again. Mao San waited for a long time and didn't see him return, so he sent people to look for him. Then, he saw that the man's body was densely covered with hundreds of spiders. In just a short while, the man's flesh was sucked clean, leaving only skin and bones. He looked like a skeleton. The person who was sent to look for him was frightened. He turned around and wanted to run, but a group of spiders followed behind him. These spiders were very fast, and the person who was chasing after them shouted for his mother as he ran. When Mao San and the others heard his cries, they knew that something bad had happened. They released their supernatural powers and raised their weapons. They were instantly on alert. Then, they saw a row of white spiders behind the man's butt. A kid with a gun tried to shoot a spider in the stomach. With a bang, the spider burst out with green blood and lay there motionless. Before he could rejoice, a bunch of small red spiders crawled out of the dead spider's stomach. Chapter 156. The little red spiders were even faster than the white ones. They caught up with the man in the blink of an eye. One of them climbed onto his ankle and bit him. The man screamed and fell down. The rest of the spiders swarmed over and sucked out another man's jerky. Mao the Third felt a chill seep into his bones. He roared, "Grab your weapons. Don't let this thing get close to you. Fire paranormals, go first." A fire ability user was the first to release a wall of fire. The wall of fire was indeed very useful against the white spiders. Once the white spiders touched the wall of fire, they would be instantly burned to death. Then, they would release countless small red spiders. These small spiders weren't afraid of the wall of fire at all. As soon as they were released, they would lie on the wall of fire. Crunch, crunch, crunch. In just a short time, they had eaten the wall of fire. The situation was very clear now. The white spiders were not terrible. The red spiders were terrible. The wall of fire killed many of the white spiders and released many smaller ones. Mao the Third felt his legs go soft. He quickly asked Xiaoqing, "Haven't you seen these spiders before? What's their weakness?" Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment. Everything she said before was made up by her. She had never seen these spiders before. On the other hand, Yin Qiwei, the know-it-all, had a rough idea of what was going on. He quickly said, "These white spiders are especially fragile. The best way to kill them is to do what the brother just did, and use a wall of fire to kill them. As for those red spiders, they can eat elements. You must use something solid to kill them. However, don't get too close to them because they are highly poisonous." Yin Qiwei didn't want to kill Mao the Third and his men, but if they were all dead, who would kill the spiders? When Mao Laosan heard this, he immediately organized his brothers who had natural abilities to attack. Fire walls, water balls, wind blades, earth spikes, everything that one could think of. When the white spiders were almost killed, it was time for the wood and metal paranormals to act. As for those strength and speed paranormals, they could only hold small pistols and fire bullets from behind. They didn't dare to go up, because once they were bitten and poisoned, they would lose their lives. After a long time, they finally cleared out all the small spiders. Other than the 2 people who died at the beginning, there was also a pitiful person. Because he was standing too close to the front, he was poisoned to death by a small spider that broke through his defenses. Another 3 people died at once. The veins on Old Mao's forehead popped out. He was so angry that he was about to stomp his feet. If they continued to die like this, they would all die before they could find anything. Without saying anything, Mao Laosan pointed his gun at Xiaoqing. Why didn't you tell me earlier that you knew about this spider's weakness? Are we late? Xiaoqing said coldly. Mao Laosan, you should have a conscience. We told you the news as soon as we realized it. If it weren't for the 2 of us, you and your team would have suffered a great loss. Mao Laosan's face turned red. He had to admit that Xiaoqing was telling the truth. After a long time, he said coldly, let's go. As soon as he took a step, Yinchua said lazily, let's change our route and take a detour. Why? Mao Laosan turned his head and looked at Yin Chihua fiercely. He looked like he would tear Yin Chihua apart if she didn't tell him the reason. Yin Chihua smiled and said, these spiders live in groups. They are like ants and have a spider queen. This spider queen doesn't need to come out to hunt and is only responsible for producing offspring. It spits out a kind of white silk that is poisonous and extremely sticky. As long as you touch it, you won't be able to survive. But after this silk is processed, it can be woven into clothes that are invulnerable. There are a lot of spiders around the Spider Queen. Chapter 157. When he heard the words invulnerable, greed flashed through third brother Mao's eyes. However, he knew his own limits. He knew that even if his group had a chance to take down the Spider Queen, they would definitely suffer heavy casualties. Their target this time wasn't the Spider Queen, so it was best not to be greedy. Detour. Hearing Mao III's words, Yin Chihua was actually a little disappointed. He really wanted to kill the Spider Queen and get some of that spider silk to weave a small vest for his wife to protect her. He and Xiaoqing could definitely take down the Spider Queen, but if they could trick Mao III into leading his men, they would be able to exhaust Mao III's strength and get the spider silk. It was simply killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Yin Chihua secretly noted the location and prepared to get the spider silk when he returned after killing Mao III. The detour was a little far. That night, they chopped down a few nearby trees and cleared out an empty space for them to rest. The next day, another person died as expected. This person had died without a sound. There was not even a single wound on his body. Mao III's eyes turned red from anger as he thought about the number of casualties. He said coldly, "The last one was bitten to death by a mosquito. What about this one? Don't tell me he was bitten to death by a fly." Yin Chihua went forward to take a look and said, "He was poisoned to death. Look at his neck. Is there a red line?" Mao San lifted the chin of the corpse and, as expected, he saw a red line at the position of the main artery. However, Mao III still couldn't believe it. Impossible. Everyone slept together at night. How could he be poisoned for no reason? Yin Chihua rubbed his chin and said, "He was poisoned by food." Mao III laughed when he heard Yin Chihua's words. He pointed at his face and said, "Do I look stupid to you?" Yin Chihua wanted to say yes, but he didn't in the end and shook his head. Mao III gritted his teeth and said, "If you don't, then why are you trying to trick me? At night, everyone eats the same thing. Why is it that we're all fine, but he's poisoned?" Yin Chihua didn't answer Mao San. Instead, she called someone who was familiar with the deceased and asked him, "Did he eat anything other than dinner tonight?" That person thought hard and then said, "Yes. He picked a few red fruits that looked like cherry tomatoes by the roadside. He said they were wild cherry tomatoes, and he wanted to eat them after meals. He even asked me to eat them, but I was afraid something would happen, so I didn't eat them. I even tried to persuade him, but he wouldn't listen. He insisted that his family used to live in the mountains and had eaten these fruits many times. They weren't poisonous." Yin Chihua smiled and said, "That's right. It's not a wild cherry tomato. It's a poisonous fruit. But it's not fatal. But he ate a lot of mushrooms that we picked last night. This fruit can't be eaten together with mushrooms." It's just like how you can't eat persimmons after drinking mutton soup, or how you can't eat lemons with prawns. So he died. What Yin Chiue said was reasonable. No matter how angry Mao San was, he could not vent it on Yin Chiue. With a dark face, he reprimanded everyone. Do you know that we are in the forest? In the forest. Don't eat whatever you want just because you have some skills. No one will care if you die. Yin Chiue smiled but didn't say anything. He pulled Xiaoqing along and followed the group. He didn't show much expression on his face, but he was secretly feeling good. He had made up the story about the poisonous fruit not being able to be eaten with the mushroom because it was indeed a wild cherry tomato fruit. He saw the man eat the wild cherry tomato with his own eyes, so he killed him. Even the red line on the man's neck was actually an allergic reaction. However, he was the only one here who knew about medicine, so he lied to them. The real cause of the man's death was that his heart was crushed by daughter. However, Mao San didn't expect that Xiaoqing could kill him secretly, so he didn't notice it until now. So far, there were only 9 of them left, including Mao San. Even if they turned against each other now, Xiaoqing was confident that she could kill them all. However, even a lion needed to use all its strength to catch a rabbit, not to mention that they were not rabbits. Since they had already entered the forest, Xiaoqing didn't mind staying here for a few more days. It was better to accompany them to find what they were looking for, and then kill them secretly to reduce their pressure. When they arrived at the river, there were only 6 of them left. Mao San almost became a frightened bird. Luckily, they had already arrived at the river. The river was very long, and it seemed to cross the entire forest. They still needed to find the wettest place along the river. It was definitely more dangerous by the river than other places. So everyone, including Xiaoqing, was vigilant. Xiaoqing was vigilant because they had already gone through a lot, and they didn't want to fail at such an easy task. As for Mao III, his men had died mysteriously. Up until now, more than half of his men had died. He couldn't allow any more deaths. Otherwise, they wouldn't even have the chance to leave the forest. Therefore, they were especially vigilant. They didn't know whether it was because they had been unlucky for so long, but after walking along the river for a whole day, they finally found what Mao San was looking for. When he saw the crooked, umbrella-like tree, he resisted the urge to cheer. Instead, he looked at it with a fervent gaze. After so many people died, they finally found it. Xiaoqing and Yin Chiue looked at each other. They had been patient for so long, and now they could finally take action. Chapter 158. The tree really looked like a crooked umbrella. Even the branches and leaves were dense and fluffy like a canopy. However, the trunk was too crooked and looked like a screw. Within 15 meters of the tree, not a single blade of grass grew. There was only a dark green vine that clung to the tree. The leaves were shaped like sharp blades, and there were a few red flowers the size of a fist that bloomed sporadically. The petals were golden and looked like flowing liquid. Among them, there were 2 green fruits the size of a fingernail that hung on the vine in the shape of water droplets. Xiaoqing noticed and Mao San's eyes immediately lit up. He quickly walked forward but stopped after 2 steps. There were dangers everywhere in the forest, especially around the important plants. There were definitely mutated beasts guarding them. Perhaps the plants themselves were very dangerous. Mao San did not dare to be careless. If he failed at the last step and even lost his life, wouldn't that be an unjust death? He called one of his subordinates over and let him go forward to test the waters. The subordinate was very brave and walked forward cautiously until he reached the bottom of the tree. There was no danger. The lackey turned around and looked at Third Brother Mao. Third Brother Mao immediately signaled for him to pick the fruit. The lackey nodded and stretched out his hand. Before his fingertips could touch the fruit, he screamed and fell to his knees. The rest of the people looked carefully and saw a palm-sized scorpion on the ground. Its stinger had already pierced through the lackey's shoe and into his flesh. The subordinate twitched on the ground and his skin slowly turned green. After a while, it returned to its normal color and lay on the ground motionless. The others didn't dare to approach. A smart person picked up a stone and threw it over. When the stone hit the underling, his body was like a balloon that had been filled with water. With a pop, a hole appeared in his body. Pus and blood flowed out. In just a few seconds, There was only a pool of pus and a piece of skin left on the ground. The rest of the people's faces turned green. What kind of poison was this? It could melt a person's bones and organs into pus and blood in an instant. Old Mao San gritted his teeth and threw out a wind blade. The wind blade easily cut the scorpion on the ground into two halves. If they looked carefully, they would find that the scorpion came out from the ground. Mao III was smart this time. He asked the Earth Paranormals to harden the ground, and then he led the others to walk over carefully. The group of people slowly approached the big tree. Xiaoqing and Yin Qiue stood behind them and didn't move. Xiaoqing and Yin Qiue were not. What Xiaoqing and Yin Qiue needed to do now was to stand there and wait until Xiaoqing's men were almost all dead. Then, they would go and pick up the spoils. Just as Xiaoqing and the others expected, as soon as the group approached the tree, countless vines ignored the hardened ground and drilled out of the ground. When they drilled out, a group of scorpions came out with them. Those scorpions saw people and jumped on them. Mao III could cut a piece of them with a wind blade, but there were too many scorpions. They drilled out of the ground in a dense way. With the vines harassing them, it was inevitable that some people would be stung by their tails. Anyone who was stung by the scorpion's tail would turn into a puddle of blood and pus within a minute. It had to be said that the scorpion had no attack power other than its venom. However, its venom was incurable. There was probably medicine that could save them, but those who were poisoned had no chance to take it. Speed-type and speed-type paranormals had it the worst. Those nature-type paranormals could cover themselves with earth and fire shields, but those who specialized in physical evolution could only scurry away like rats. Chapter 159. Xiaoqing was watching from the side. She noticed that the tree seemed to be moving, but when she looked carefully, she realized that it was not the tree that was moving, but the leaves. There were many moths behind the leaves, and their wings were bigger than ordinary moths. They had pink scales, and when they spread their wings, the pink scales would fall down. Whoever it fell on would be paralyzed, and the scorpion tails would pierce into their bodies, turning them into pus and blood. Even those who had opened up their energy shields could not escape. When the scales fell on their shields, the shields would slowly melt, and in the end, they would be paralyzed and poisoned to death. Fortunately, Mao III reacted quickly. He waved his hand, and a whirling wind blade rolled up a bunch of moths. The pink scales and broken wings fell down. These moths did not have any defensive abilities, and were quickly killed. After killing all the moths, it was much easier to kill the scorpions. Mao III was harassed by the vines, and he could not help but condense a meter-long wind blade and cut it at the tree. The tree was immediately cut in half, and red liquid flowed out like blood. Not to mention Xiaoqing, even the more knowledgeable Yin Qiue was shocked. There was really a tree that could bleed. There was a Fergana horse among horses, but could there be a Fergana tree among trees? When the tree was cut down, the vines immediately went crazy, and several paranormals who had opened their energy shields were directly sent flying. One of the paranormals was very unlucky. His energy shield was directly shattered, and the moment he fell into the river, a crocodile opened its mouth and swallowed the meat pie that fell from the sky. The other paranormals were quite lucky. Although they were sent flying, they landed in a relatively safe place. Other than a few scratches from the mutated weeds nearby, they did not suffer any other injuries. The only one left was Third Bro Mao. Third Bro Mao's entire body was covered in wounds caused by the vines. He was determined. He didn't care if his ability would be overdrawn. He raised both his hands and used a big move. The wind blade was like a huge moon. It directly cleared the remaining scorpions and cut down the big tree. The 10-meter-tall tree suddenly collapsed, and the green vines fell to the ground. Blood-like liquid flowed out. Mao III was also lying on the ground, exhausted. He gasped for breath for a while, and then shouted, "Lu Zi, go and pick the fruit." After a long time, no one answered. Mao III was a little angry. "Lu Zi, I'm calling you." Before he finished his words, he was stunned, because Lu Zi's head was no longer on his neck. Not only Lu Zi, but the other paranormals who survived were even more miserable, because they were all killed by Yin Qiue. They were all squeezed into a ball by the compressed air. Lu Zi died relatively quickly. Shao Qing was still wiping the knife at the moment. Mao the Third's eyes were red. You. Shao Qing put the shiny knife back into the sheath and sneered. What did we do? Didn't I just kidnap you and ask you to lead the way? How can you be so cruel? Mao the Third could not get up for a while. He gritted his teeth and said, Well, after all, I am a cruel person. Shao Qing smiled. Mao the Third suddenly felt a sharp pain in his heart, and in the next second, he was already dead. Before he died, Mao the Third finally understood that his brothers who died in the accident were all killed by Shao Qing and Lu Zi. Tender sprouts slowly drilled out of Mao the Third's dead body. Yin Qiue took the energy nuclei of the paranormals and kindly piled them together. There was a saying, don't ask to be born in the same year and month, but die in the same year and month. Don't ask to be born in the same bed, but die in the same coffin. He was just helping others. Wait, something was wrong. Chapter 160. It's better to strike first. Shao Qing sighed and went forward to pick the fruit. She was very curious about this fruit. Something that made Mao Laosan and his gang risk their lives to get their hands on shouldn't be too bad. At this moment, Yin Qiue had already found a bottle to collect the sap that flowed out of the tree. The two of them worked together, and there was a sense of tacit understanding. Just as Shao Qing touched the fruit, a giant python came out of the river. If the python that she and Xiao Mo had encountered before was as thick as a water bucket, then this one was a little thicker than a water jar. She didn't know how long it had lived for it to be so long, but Shao Qing knew that this thing was coming for them. Shao Qing made a prompt decision and directly pulled the dark green vine from the tree, stuffed it into her space, then picked up Yin Qiue and ran. What a joke. How could such a long thing be worse than the previous one? If the two of them were injured and others took advantage of them on the way back, it wouldn't be fun. Originally, Shao Qing thought that after she and Yin Qiue ran for a while, the giant python would give up. After all, almost all animals had their own territory, especially this kind of big guy. It rarely left its territory and even hunted in its own territory. Of course, the terrifying existence of marching ants was an exception. However, this giant python had already chased them for almost 10 miles and didn't have the slightest intention of giving up. Shao Qing was a little annoyed. She was still holding Yin Qiue in her arms. The vine that we snatched might be something good. This giant python has probably been eyeing it for a long time. It's just that there are too many scorpions and moths guarding it, so it didn't make a move. In the end, the two of us got it, so it's chasing us relentlessly. Yin Qiue analyzed, in this situation, we can either run out of the forest or fight it out with it. It's probably impossible to stop it from chasing us. Shao Qing nodded and instantly reached a tacit understanding with Yin Qiue. She turned around and directly threw Yin Qiue out. While Yin Qiue was in midair, he had already adjusted his posture. When he landed, he happened to be on top of the python's head. He held a dagger in his hand and steadily, accurately, and viciously stabbed towards the python's eyes. The python suddenly lowered its head. As it swung its body, Yin Qiue tilted a little and the dagger fell above the python's eyes, drawing a line of sparks. In the next second, the python began to roll around. Yin Qiue clung tightly to the python's scales. He was dizzy from being tossed around. He gritted his teeth and vowed to stay on the python's head, but the python wanted to shake him off. Seeing that it couldn't shake him off, the python slammed its head against a tree. Yin Qiue hurriedly jumped, and Shao Qing's vine appeared around his waist. Shao Qing exerted force and pulled him back. A big tree that needed 2 people to wrap their arms around was broken. The big tree fell to the ground, stirring up a cloud of dust. The scales on its body are too strong. When I stabbed it with the dagger, my hand hurt from the shock, but it's fine. Yin Qiue was so angry that he cursed. Its weakness should be its eyes or something. Shao Qing was still in the mood to joke while studying it. Its anus should be its weakness too. Yin Qiue, let me give it a try. Shao Qing pondered for a moment and then said. Yin Qiue immediately pulled her back. I'll go. You have the vine. You can save me at a critical moment. Let me go up. Do you know where its 7 inches are? Can you accurately stab its vital points when it's tossing around? Don't mess around. Shao Qing touched Yin Qiue's head. When the python got up dizzily, She jumped up and jumped onto the python's head. Chapter 161. As soon as the python felt that someone was on its head, it hurriedly continued to shake its head. Shaoqing's endurance was better than Yin Qiu's. The python soon became dizzy. It twisted its body dizzily and wanted to hit a tree. Shaoqing grabbed its scales, turned over, and reached its chin. The python broke a big tree again. Shaoqing took advantage of its dizziness to stab its eyes. To Shaoqing's surprise, she could only stab the tip of the knife, and then she couldn't stab it anymore. Just as Shaoqing was about to stab it harder, the python writhed in pain and began to roll on the ground in various positions, trying to crush Shaoqing into meat paste. Yin Qiue opened his eyes this time. He saw that Shaoqing followed the python's rhythm and kept changing her position on the python's body. The python rolled on the ground with its face covered in dust, but it couldn't press down on Shaoqing. It was completely angry. All the scales on its body suddenly opened, like sharp knives. Shaoqing was caught off guard. Her hands and waist were cut several times. When the python rolled again, she couldn't jump on the python's body unscrupulously because she could only grab the scales. But as long as she grabbed the scales, her hands would be injured. Shaoqing had no choice but to kick the python's body. She somersaulted to the ground and then quickly returned to Yin Qiue's side. Yin Qiue's eyes were red. It didn't matter if he was injured, but that thing hurt Shaoqing. It hurt Shaoqing in front of him. Don't be impulsive. Shaoqing grabbed Yin Qiue. Take a few steps back. Go to a place where the trees are denser. It won't be as flexible there. Yin Qiue suppressed his anger and followed Shaoqing to a denser place. Sure enough, the python didn't give up and chased after them. As everyone knew, pythons were rarely poisonous. They relied on their huge bodies to strangle their prey and then swallow it. This one should be no exception. Its attack method had always been collision. For Shaoqing and Yin Qiue, who were more flexible, there was no danger at all. If it wasn't for its speed, it would be easy to shake it off. Shaoqing threw Yin Qiue onto a tree. She kicked the trunk, then jumped and landed on the python's head again. The military knife in her hand stabbed the python's eyes for the second time. Shaoqing's technique was extremely accurate. Even when she was jumping, even when the snake's head was constantly shaking, she was still able to stab steadily into the same position as before. This time, she stabbed a little deeper. Once she hit the target, Shaoqing didn't even bother to retrieve her military knife. She turned around and leaped onto a tree. Yin Qiue immediately used his supernatural ability to squeeze the air around the military knife. His forehead was covered with cold sweat, but the military knife was inserted inch by inch. Soon, it reached the handle. Unfortunately, the military knife was too short to stab the python's brain. Although it blinded one of its eyes and caused great pain, it wasn't fatal. The python rolled on the ground in pain. Countless trees were broken by its tail and body. Shaoqing quickly jumped from tree to tree with Yin Qiue. The trees behind them fell down one by one, but they couldn't keep up with their jumping speed. We can't. Its snakeskin's defense is too high. Neither of us can break through its defense. If this goes on, we'll exhaust our abilities and it won't die, Shaoqing said very calmly. Yin Qiue's mind was twisted. He couldn't help but ask, are we really going to attack its anus? Shaoqing was speechless. What a joke. Let's observe it a little longer. Shaoqing didn't give up and released vines to bind the python's body. However, as she expected, the thorns on the vines couldn't pierce the python's body at all. The python was so strong that it broke free with a struggle. She released daughter, which successfully entered the python's body. However, as soon as it entered, it was corroded by a strange energy. Needless to say, there was the man-eating flower and the autumn flower. Right, the autumn flower. Shaoqing's eyes lit up. After subduing the plant, she released it for the first time. The autumn flower exuded a comfortable fragrance. It could increase the combat power of allies. Although it wasn't as good as the invincible pill, it didn't have any side effects. Moreover, it would be upgraded with Shaoqing's level. In addition, the autumn flower also exuded a fragrance that made people feel weak. Although they didn't know if it was effective against snakes, they had to try. As soon as the autumn flower was released, the python's eyes lit up. It rushed over, probably wanting to eat the autumn flower. However, just as it was about to get close, its speed became slower and slower. Finally, it collapsed on the ground. It works. Xiao Qing's eyes lit up. She tentatively walked forward and pulled out the military knife. Although the python wailed in pain, it didn't have the strength to move. The two walked around the python and stabbed it several times with all their strength, including the 7 inches of the python's body. Then, they found that they couldn't even break the skin. The scales at the 7 inches were fine. They could stab it, but it wouldn't kill it. The key was its eyes. Xiao Qing stood there and gestured twice. The military knife was too short. No matter how she stabbed, she couldn't stab the python's eyes. She poked the python twice tentatively, causing it to howl. However, even if she poked its eyeballs, she couldn't kill it. Xiao Qing evilly poked the python's other eye and blinded it. This way, as a blind snake, it shouldn't be dangerous. After stabbing it blind, even if they couldn't kill it, they could leave. How could they chase a blind snake? Get out of the way! Yin Qiyu suddenly shouted in panic and was about to rush over. Xiao Qing was stunned. It was too late. The python that couldn't move suddenly opened its mouth and spat out its blood-red tongue, swallowing her. Xiao Qing forgot that snakes didn't rely on their eyes to hunt. They relied on their tongue, which was their tongue. Chapter 162. At that moment, Yin Qiyu felt that if Xiao Qing really died, then he would accompany her. Although he couldn't be her husband when she was alive, he could at least share the same coffin as her when she died. The air around the snake was suddenly squeezed, and Yin Qiyu was desperately releasing her power. In the end, one could even see that the space around the big python was being squeezed to the point of instability, and tiny space cracks appeared around it. Correspondingly, Yin Qiyu's face was getting paler and paler, and blood was quietly dripping from the corner of his mouth. He had already done his best, and was even overdrawing his ability. If this continued, there would only be one result, and that was that the crystal core would shatter. Naturally, he wouldn't be able to survive. Just as Yin Qiyu was about to die together with the python, he suddenly saw a protrusion grow on the python's head. That protrusion grew taller and taller, and finally, with a poof, a large hole opened up in the python's head. Xiao Qing, who was covered in blood, crawled out of the hole with some difficulty. At this moment, her hair and body were covered in the python's flesh and sticky transparent liquid. She looked like she had crawled out of hell. Xiao Qing exerted her strength and pulled out her foot that was stuck in the hole. Before she could stand firm, Yin Qiyu rushed over. She was still covered in dirty things, but Yin Qiyu didn't mind and hugged her tightly. Xiao Qing coughed and said, "I'm fine." In fact, she did it on purpose. Otherwise, if she didn't know how long Qiu Tang could stun the python, would she dare to stand in front of the python and study it for such a long time? The python's weakness was none other than a few places. Attacking the eyes was useless, attacking the 7 inches was useless, and needless to say, the anus was needless. Only the mouth and stomach were not protected by scales. She couldn't possibly stab the anus with the python's tail, right? After entering the snake's stomach, it was another question whether there would be a chance to get out. Therefore, Xiao Qing chose the most difficult, but also the most promising place, the mouth. Snakes like to strangle their prey and swallow them. Their fangs were not used to kill their prey, but to inject poison into their prey. Therefore, when Xiao Qing was swallowed, she did not have to worry about being bitten. She threw out the vines and hung herself on the snake's fangs. Finally, she stabbed the snake's brain with a military knife. She tore open the python's insides with her bare hands and crawled out. The situation was too complicated before, so Xiao Qing didn't have time to discuss it with Yin Qiyu. She was also afraid that Yin Qiyu wouldn't agree to her taking the risk and insisted on going alone, so she didn't discuss it with her. Xiao Qing couldn't help but comfort Yin Qiyu. "It's just a snake. It can't kill me." Yin Qiyu put his head on Xiao Qing's shoulder, sighed with relief, and fainted. Xiao Qing lowered her head and saw Yin Qiyu's pale face. There was still a trace of crimson on the corners of his lips, but his expression was very peaceful. The wood power was born with the ability to heal. Although it was very weak, it was better than nothing. However, Xiao Qing's recovery ability was too strong. so the little healing ability of the wood power was useless to her. Xiao Qing laid Yin Qiyu flat on the ground and used her power to explore Yin Qiyu's body. The power in his body was almost exhausted, and only a trace of weak power was slowly circulating in his body. Xiao Qing understood in an instant. Yin Qiyu must have thought that she was dead just now, so he tried his best and overdrew his power. Obviously, Yin Qiyu didn't want to live. There was a moment of confusion in Xiao Qing's eyes. She had never met such a man, who loved her so much that he was willing to live and die with her. Moreover, they had the most intimate relationship. The relationship between them could no longer be defined simply, but Xiao Qing didn't want to be Yin Qiyu's lover. Chapter 163. She probably doted on Yin Qiyu like a child, mixed with friendship, kinship, and complicated emotions that she couldn't explain. But now, Xiao Qing couldn't help but feel a little escape. It seemed that she couldn't give Yin Qiyu what he wanted. Xiao Qing injected her ability into Yin Qiyu's body to repair his injured body while letting her imagination run wild. When Yin Qiyu's breathing calmed down, Xiao Qing breathed a sigh of relief. She stood up and dismantled the python. She was very skilled in dismantling the python. It looked like she was handling ingredients in the kitchen. She easily separated the python's skin and meat. The python's skin was so tough that it could be used to make armor or something. Bones and meat actually had many uses. The meat could be eaten, the bones could be used as medicine, and they could be used to make wine. However, Xiao Qing's storage space wasn't big to begin with. Even after leveling up, the space had expanded, but after storing so many things, it couldn't hold the python at all. So she took a few pieces of meat, dug out the crystal nucleus, kept the skin, and threw the rest aside. After dealing with the python, Xiao Qing took Yin Qiyu to the river. Her body was sticky and covered with dried blood. If she didn't wash it, it would stick. So when Yin Qiyu woke up, he saw Xiao Qing sitting cross-legged by the river, combing her long hair. Her long black hair was still dripping with water, and Yin Qiyu could only see her white neck. Yin Qiyu moved his body and then fell back again. He had overdrawn too much, and his body couldn't take it anymore. His various functions were about to stop working. Xiao Qing combed her wet hair and said, "You can't move your body. Recover slowly. When we leave the forest, you should be almost recovered. Don't try to show off these few days. Be good and let me carry you." Yin Qiyu didn't say anything. He was a little angry. He was angry at Xiao Qing for acting on her own, but he didn't want to argue with Xiao Qing, so he sulked alone. Xiao Qing didn't say anything. She carried him on her back. When her wet hair hung down, it even rubbed against Yin Qiyu. It was cool. Xiao Qing didn't know how to coax people, and she didn't know how to coax people. They didn't talk all the way until it was time to eat. They ate snake meat. Xiao Qing roasted the meat and brushed it with seasoning. It smelled delicious. She cut the snake meat into pieces and handed them to Yin Qiyu. As soon as Yin Qiyu looked up, she saw Xiao Qing, who was usually very cold, but at this moment there was gentleness in her eyes. The anger in her heart immediately dissipated. He slowly picked up a piece and bit it fiercely. After he was full, he lay in Xiao Qing's arms. Yin Qiyu really wanted to tell Xiao Qing not to take any more risks in the future. Even if there was something dangerous, she should inform him in advance. He was really worried, so worried that he was going to die. But at this moment, he didn't know what to say. What was his relationship with Xiao Qing? Was he qualified to say this? Xiao Qing seemed to see through his thoughts. She carried him on her back and said softly, "I won't do it in the future. Won't take risks, or won't take risks privately." Yin Qiyu didn't ask. He held Xiao Qing's neck tightly. His heart was already stable. Xiao Qing heard no response from behind, so she couldn't help but turn her head. It didn't matter when she turned her head, but when Yin Qiyu raised his head, the two of them met eyes. Not only did they meet eyes, but also their lips. Xiao Qing was stunned at that time. What was that soft and a little warm? Yin Qiyu was very good at seizing the opportunity. He was able to lean forward and kiss Xiao Qing's lips. The soft tip of his tongue stretched out and swept across Xiao Qing's teeth, tentatively. Chapter 164. There was also a faint meaty aroma mixed with an indescribable aroma. Xiao Qing's sense of taste was weak, but she could still feel a faint aroma. She didn't know if it came from the meat Yin Qiyu had eaten or the saliva in his mouth, but it seeped through the gaps between her teeth and stained the tip of her tongue. Xiao Qing was in a daze. Unknowingly, she opened a gap between her teeth. Yin Qiyue's eyes lit up. He pried open Xiao Qing's teeth and swept his tongue inside Xiao Qing's mouth. Xiao Qing, who was stunned for a long time, felt a little dizzy. After a long time, she came back to her senses and turned her head. However, because she moved too fast, she pulled a silver thread, which broke with a snap. At that moment, Xiao Qing's face was as red as the burning clouds in the sky. She staggered and almost bumped into a tree. Then, her face became even redder. She ran back in the direction she came from. Even the cold wind couldn't blow away the blush on her cheeks. At that moment, her mind was not filled with the thought of being taken advantage of, nor was it that Yin Qiyu was so bold. It was just that his lips and tongue were so soft. Why did she have such a strange thought? The two walked for 3 days and finally walked out of the jungle for the second time. At this time, Yin Qiyu could already move. Running and jumping were not a problem, but his speed was still not good enough. So, Xiao Qing still carried him on her back. The two of them rushed forward in a straight line at lightning speed. After walking for almost a day, Xiao Qing was stunned. She saw a familiar scene. It was the place where the bandits had dug a pit as a trap and almost destroyed their 2 SUVs. Xiao Qing was silent for a long time, and then said, "We are going in the opposite direction." If they kept going forward, they would reach Yinjiang. They were going in the opposite direction of Linchuan survivor base. There were 2 options in front of Xiao Qing. One was to go directly to the Jiangbei survivor base and see if she could find air dye. On the way back, she could change her route and see if they were in the S-City survivor base. The second option was to go back to Linchuan survivor base first. After dealing with Yin Qiyu, he would go to S-City survivor base and Jiangbei survivor base. Xiao Qing really didn't know how to choose, so she directly threw the problem to Yin Qiyu. Yin Qiyu was very supportive and said directly, "Let's go to the Jiangbei survivor base first. Linchuan is fine. As long as Qiao Mo isn't dead, there won't be any chaos. We can go back whenever we want." Xiao Qing breathed a sigh of relief. She directly crossed the mountain pass in front of them and walked forward along the route they had taken last time. When they reached the edge of the city, Xiao Qing specially went to check on the temporary residence she had found for Yin Hanqing and the others. They were no longer there, and the house was very tidy. It didn't look like there had been a battle. They should have all evacuated safely. Xiao Qing breathed a sigh of relief. She directly took Yin Qiyu through the city at the fastest speed, and finally arrived at the edge of Yinjiang. Yinjiang was very wide. It was impossible for Xiao Qing to fly across. She could only think of other ways. In the end, she finally saw a boat after walking upstream for a long time. The abandoned metal boat was lying in the grass. It was already a little rusty, but it was just enough for Xiao Qing and Yin Qiyu to cross the river. Not far across the river was the Jiangbei survivor base. Xiao Qing breathed a sigh of relief, but also a little nervous. She really hoped to see her teammates at the Jiangbei survivor base, but she was also afraid that they wouldn't be there. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Yin Qiyu could feel Xiao Qing's slightly trembling shoulders. He deliberately distracted Xiao Qing. "Don't you think it's a little frivolous that I didn't bring any gifts?" Chapter 165. Xiao Qing couldn't help but laugh. "It's not like you're meeting your mother-in-law. Why are you being so frivolous?" Yin Qiyu widened her eyes. "It's almost like meeting your mother-in-law. What if your teammates don't like me, and you decide to abandon me?" Xiao Qing's mood relaxed a lot because of his words. She pondered for a moment, then said, "Then I'll tell them that you're my sugar baby. Then you must be my sugar baby for the rest of your life." Yin Qiyu leaned on Xiao Qing's back and chuckled. They didn't put Yin Qiyu down until they reached the gate of Jiangbei survivor base. Then they walked over together. There were many people at the gate of Jiangbei survivor base. They were probably the nearby survivors who came to seek shelter, and there were also ordinary people who came back from the outside. Both of them had to be checked to make sure that they weren't infected by zombies before they were allowed to enter the base. As for the superpowered people, They didn't need to be checked or registered except for the first time when they entered the base. It was the first time that Xiaoqing and Yin Qiyu came to Jiangbei Survivor Base, so they lined up at the gate obediently. After all, nothing could be accomplished without rules. The base had set the rules, so they couldn't do anything against the rules just because they had the ability. People like them usually died relatively quickly. The two of them were rather eye-catching in the group. After all, they were a handsome man and a beautiful woman. Moreover, the two of them were dressed neatly and looked very relaxed. They were completely different from the people around them who had escaped from the disaster and were dressed in rags and looked like they were emaciated. Although the line was very long, it was still very fast as long as no one cut in line. It was hard to say if someone cut in line. Just as Xiaoqing was about to reach the front of the line, several well-dressed men came over. From the gate of Jiangbei Survivor Base came a good-looking young man who exuded a sense of licentiousness. As soon as the men saw the young man, they greeted him. "Brother Hao. Brother Hao, you're finally here. We've been waiting for you for a long time." The young man called Brother Hao immediately waved his hand. "What are you waiting for? Come with me." As he spoke, he led a few people in front of Xiaoqing and Yin Qiyu and directly cut the queue. Cutting the queue was actually not a big deal. With Xiaoqing's character, she would definitely not fuss over such a small matter. That person shouldn't have pushed Yin Qiyu, and he shouldn't have used so much strength. Before Yin Qiyu met Xiaoqing, he was a devil incarnate. His temper didn't need much, but after meeting Xiaoqing, Yin Qiyu restrained himself a lot. At least, he wouldn't care about such trivial things. But that person shouldn't have stared at Xiaoqing after pushing him away. The way he looked at Xiaoqing was as if he wanted to strip off her clothes. Therefore, this seemingly arrogant brother Hao offended both Xiaoqing and Yin Qiyu as soon as he came up. He didn't know it himself, but he was almost drooling when he looked at Xiaoqing. 1 word, good. 2 words, good. 3 words, I want to have sex with you. Brother Hao thought that he had seen a lot of beautiful women. For example, the beautiful woman next to his eldest brother was a hot girl with big breasts and round buttocks. But compared with Xiaoqing, that beautiful hot girl was full of prostitutes in an instant. Besides, the number 1 beauty in their base was not only not beautiful, but also had a little unique charm of a young woman. But she was still a little inferior to Xiaoqing. It was the first time that Brother Hao had seen such a beautiful woman. He made a pose that he thought was very handsome, took out a box of Zhonghua cigarettes, and smoked a cigarette. Immediately, a man with good eyesight came up to light a cigarette for him. Brother Hao thought that he was very stylish. Whether it was the Zhonghua cigarette in his hand, the way he held the cigarette, or even his greasy bangs, he was so handsome that no one could compare with him. However, in Xiaoqing's eyes, he was a fool with a brain damage index of more than 101. She gave him 1 more point to make him proud. "Sister, where are you from?" Brother Hao came over and said, "Are you going to live in Jiangbei Survivor Base for a long time? Or are you looking for someone?" Xiaoqing didn't say anything. She was thinking that if she beat up the man in front of her at the gate of Jiangbei Survivor Base, wouldn't it be too disrespectful to Mengshan and the others? Yin Qiyu made an excuse. "Can you move aside? You are blocking the door." Yin Qiyu's appearance was good-looking, but it was also bad-looking that he was feminine. Brother Hao didn't take Yin Qiyu seriously at all. He made a gesture of shaking the cigarette butt, and then said, "Boy, how dare you talk to me like that? Do you know who I am? Do you know where this is? This is Jiangbei Survivor Base. How dare you be so arrogant at the gate of our base? You are really something." Yin Qiyu clenched his fists tightly, not because he was angry, but because he had to suppress his anger. What if he killed this man and caused trouble for Xiaoqing? They came here today to look for someone, not to fight. The more Yin Qiyu restrained himself, the more the man was convinced that Yin Qiyu was not capable, and the more arrogant he became. He sneered and said, "Do you believe that I will let you crawl out of Jiangbei Survivor Base? Boy, I will teach you a lesson today. If you are not capable, you should shrink your head, or it will be easy for people to break your neck." At that moment, Yin Qiyu's murderous aura was so strong that it almost materialized. Brother Hao shivered and murmured, "Is the wind blowing? Why is it a little cold? What you just said is really right. If you are not capable, you should shrink your head, or it will be easy for people to break your neck." Xiaoqing sneered. Her eyes were clear, and she looked beautiful no matter how she smiled, including sneering. Brother Hao was stunned and almost drooled. He said proudly, "See, all the beauties agree with me." However, Xiaoqing looked at him as if she was looking at a dead man. Chapter 166. At that moment, Xiaoqing really wanted to take action. However, when she was about to do so, a man appeared in her sight. The man was none other than Yin Pingshan. Yin Pingshan sat in the off-road vehicle with no expression on his face. He looked very serious. As soon as he came out, Brother Hao and the others hurriedly made way for him. Everyone looked at him with awe. Brother Hao pulled Xiaoqing and said to Xiaoqing, "He's the leader of our base. Don't offend him." Without saying anything, Xiaoqing stood in the only way of the off-road vehicle. Brother Hao was so scared that he peed his pants. He didn't expect Xiaoqing to be such a brave person. The off-road vehicle immediately stopped. The driver stuck his head out and scolded, "Are you crazy?" Then the driver was pressed on the steering wheel by Yin Pingshan. He jumped out of the car with surprise. "Qing, is that you?" Xiaoqing nodded and said, "Where's Dai? Where's my son? Is he with you? Let's go in and talk." Yin Pingshan hesitated and said. The people behind him immediately asked, "Are we going to?" Before he finished, Yin Pingshan shouted, "Let's go. Let's go back." However, when facing Xiaoqing, he was extraordinarily pleasant. "I'll go and call Mingshan. Let's sit down and talk for a while." Xiaoqing took Yin Qiue and followed Yin Pingshan into the house. Brother Hao, who was trying to flirt with Xiaoqing, was speechless. Mingshan was a little thin, but he couldn't hide the joy on his face. When he heard the news about Yin Pingshan, he left everything in his hands and rushed over. "Fortunately, you're fine." Yin Qiue became alert. Xiaoqing was actually a very slow person. She couldn't feel it, but Yin Qiue could clearly feel that the man in front of her was interested in Xiaoqing. Yin Qiue quickly hugged Xiaoqing's arm and said with a smile, "Qing, won't you introduce him to me?" Xiaoqing didn't understand what Yin Qiue was thinking. She said very seriously, "This is Yin Pingshan, and this is Mingshan. They are both my friends." After saying that, she pointed at Yin Qiue. "Previously, I fell into Yin River, and it was Qiue who saved me." "Qiue, how intimate." Mingshan narrowed his eyes and suddenly smiled. "Qing, are you planning to settle down in Jiangbei Survivor Base this time? I'm here to see if you guys got out safely, and are Dai and the others in the Jiangbei Survivor Base now?" Xiaoqing frowned and asked in a low voice. Mingshan shook his head and said, "At that time, you fell into the water, and Dai jumped in right after you. Pingsheng and I sent people to search along Yin River, but we couldn't find you too. Yin Hanqing and the others stayed in the Jiangbei Survivor Base for a few days. They wanted to wait for you to come back, but you didn't come back. They went back with Yin Ruru and said that they would go back to find you." Yin Pingshan immediately said, "They said that they would search along Yin River, one by one. That way, they would be able to find you." Xiaoqing and Yin Hanqing looked at each other and felt a little annoyed. If Yin Hanqing and the others went along Yin River, they should have arrived at Linchuan Survivor Base by now. Yin Hanqing and the others were definitely fine. Xiaoqing was most worried about Dai. She wasn't worried that something would happen to Dai in the river. Xiaoqing was worried that after he came ashore, he would meet people with bad intentions who would use him, or his identity would be exposed. Xiaoqing made a prompt decision. "If that's the case, I will go and find them now." Yin Pingshan quickly said, "Don't you want to stay for a few more days? It's not easy to see you." Yin Pingshan winked at Mingshan. He could see clearly that Mingshan liked Xiaoqing. If Xiaoqing left now, he didn't know when they would meet again. Chapter 167. Yin Pingshan naturally wanted to create an opportunity for Mingshan. "No, I'm really worried about them." Xiaoqing shook her head and said softly, "Especially Dai. His identity is too sensitive." Mingshan lowered his head and said after a while, "You go quickly. It's more important to meet up with your teammates. We have plenty of time to catch up later." Xiaoqing nodded. She didn't stay for a moment and immediately prepared to leave. Before she left, Yin Pingshan gave her a lot of things, including food and necessities. Xiaoqing didn't refuse and took all of them. After they walked out of Jiangbei Survivor Base, Yin Qiue was relieved. There were indeed many people who coveted Xiaoqing. Fortunately, he acted quickly, unlike Ming Shun, who was hesitant. It was destined that he couldn't win against him. After Xiaoqing left, Yin Pingshan jumped and said, "Why can't you be enlightened? Now that you let Xiaoqing go, do you still have a chance in the future?" Ming Shun was depressed for a moment, but he quickly glanced at Yin Pingshan and said, "It's not you who is looking for a wife. Why are you jumping?" He knew very well that he couldn't keep Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing would definitely go to air die. Instead of annoying Xiaoqing, it was better to be decisive and let her go. If they were fated to meet again, they would meet again. After Xiaoqing left Jiangbei Survivor Base, she didn't want to go back to S-City. She took Yin Pingshan and ran along the Yin River. They drove an off-road car that Yin Pingshan gave them. When they passed by a survivor base, Xiaoqing would go in and ask if Yin Hanqing and the others had been there. There were many survivor bases. They met at least 7 or 8 along the way, big and small. They didn't see Yin Hanqing and the others until they reached Linchuan Survivor Base. Xiaoqing knew that this matter couldn't be rushed, so she didn't say much. She just said, "Since we are going back to Linchuan Survivor Base, let's go back first and let Xiaomo feel at ease. We can also see if they have arrived at Linchuan." Yin Qiyu nodded. In fact, he didn't want Xiaoqing to find her teammates. Now they were alone. Once they found Xiaoqing's teammates, it would be a world of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people. He wouldn't be able to monopolize Xiaoqing anymore. Therefore, Yin Qiyu hoped that Xiaoqing couldn't find her teammates, so he could accompany her to find them. At the same time, he hoped that Xiaoqing could find them, because he didn't want to see Xiaoqing so anxious. It was like ice and fire. Yin Qiyu swiped his ID card and successfully entered Linchuan Survivor Base. Immediately, someone went to inform Xiaomo that Yin Qiyu was back. After Xiaomo returned to the base, the first thing he did was to send 10 teams of paranormals to find Yin Qiyu. It could be seen how important Yin Qiyu was in Xiaomo's heart. Yin Qiyu threw the car directly to the guard, then walked inside with Xiaoqing. They needed to go back to Yin Qiyu's house first and pack up a little. They estimated that Xiaomo would come at this time. They told Xiaomo that they were going to take a look around the base, then they could continue to look for Yin Hanqing and the others. However, the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. When the two were crossing the square to go home, they saw several familiar figures. The corners of Xiaoqing's eyes immediately moistened, because those figures were none other than Yin Hanqing and the others. Xiaoqing didn't say anything and walked over, ready to greet Yin Hanqing and the others. When she got closer, she found that there were several people standing in front of Yin Hanqing, and the leader was none other than Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu's face was gloomy, and he was holding a very familiar rabbit in his hand. He was talking to Yin Hanqing and the others. "Animals are rude because they are animals. Are you animals too?" Chapter 168. Little Bun clenched his fists and shouted at Xiaoyu, "Give ya back to me!" Xiaoyu held the rabbit and looked it up and down. Then, she sneered, "You want it?" Then, before Little Bun could say anything, Xiaoyu grabbed one of the rabbit's ears and tore it off. Yaya was in so much pain that it kicked its legs. Just as Xiaoyu was about to tear off the second ear, Little Bun suddenly ran over and jumped. He grabbed Xiaoyu's wrist and bit it. Xiaoyu swung her hand in pain and threw Little Bun away. Fortunately, Yin Hanqing was quick enough to catch Little Bun. He said with a cold face, "Aren't you going a little overboard?" Xiaoyu immediately scolded, "First, your rabbit bumped into me, then this little bastard bit me. How am I going overboard? I'll tell you today. Either you kneel down, kowtow to me, and shout I'm wrong 3 times, or, heh, this little bastard. I'll skin him alive." As she spoke, Xiaoyu reached out to grab Little Bun. Yin Hanqing's face immediately turned cold. He took a step back and dodged Xiaoyu's hand. Then, he said stiffly, "You're the one who's being unreasonable. If you do this again, I won't be polite anymore." "Oh? I'll show you how unreasonable I am today." Xiaoyu was already angry because of what happened with Yin Qiyu last time. Now, her anger overflowed even more. It was fine if Yin Qiyu didn't treat her nicely. Her brother wouldn't allow her to do anything to Yin Qiyu. But who were these people? How dare they be arrogant in front of her? Xiaoyu immediately attacked. She was a wind ability user. Although her ability wasn't high, it was still at level 2. She viciously slashed a wind blade at Little Bun's neck. Not to mention Yin Hanqing. Even Gu Chuan and his sister's faces turned ugly. The first one to make a move was Gu Panpan. She stretched her arm out in front of Yin Hanqing, and with a clench of her hand, she shattered the wind blade. Disregarding everything else, Gu Panpan was now a high-rank 3 metahuman. She was not someone that Xiaoyu, who had not experienced any battles and was only a metahuman that relied on crystal cores, could compare to. However, as soon as Xiaoyu made a move, her bodyguards also made a move. These people didn't dare to let anything happen to Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu was Xiao Mo's younger sister. If something happened to Xiaoyu, they wouldn't be able to stay in Linchuan survivor base anymore. The 4 bodyguards aimed at Yin Hanqing in unison. They could tell that the Little Bun was the weakness of Yin Hanqing and the others. Like master, like bodyguards. Every move they made was ruthless. Against a child, all of them were deadly moves. However, Gu Panpan and the others didn't make a move. Countless vines instantly formed a high wall in front of Yin Hanqing. No one's attack could penetrate this wall. The vines were too familiar. They looked to the side in surprise. Xiaoqing descended from the sky and kicked one of the bodyguard's buttocks. In the next second, countless vines flew forward and grabbed the bodyguard's limbs, including his neck. Xiaoqing jumped up and kneed his spine. With a cracking sound, the man's spine broke. Then, Xiaoqing threw him aside like a piece of trash. If a person's spine was broken, they could only be paralyzed in bed for the rest of their life. Especially in this post-apocalyptic world, they might as well die. Xiaoqing's move was too ruthless. The remaining 3 bodyguards looked at each other and didn't dare to make a move. They didn't dare to make a move, but Xiaoqing did. She raised her hand and the vines flew out like snakes. The 3 bodyguards didn't dare to resist and retreated quickly. Chapter 169. Xiaoyu originally wanted to scold these cowardly bodyguards, but then she saw Yin Qiue walking over. Her face immediately turned pale, and she wanted to squat at the side and vomit. The trauma from last time was still vivid in her mind, and she didn't dare to go against Yin Qiue again. "Why are you running?" Xiaoqing sneered. She clenched her fist, and one of the bodyguards immediately knelt on the ground. Countless sprouts emerged from his body, tearing through his clothes and swaying in the wind. Xiaoqing chose the cruelest method, which was to let the daughter grow out of his body and use its roots to fill his organs. This way of dying was the slowest and most painful way. However, Xiaoqing felt that it wasn't enough because these people in front of her actually attacked Little Bun. That was her life, and it was more important than her own. If anyone attacked Little Bun, it would be worse than taking her life. Then, they couldn't blame her for being ruthless. That person's death frightened the remaining 2 bodyguards. The 2 of them broke into a run, no longer caring about Xiaoyu and Xiaobuyu. Although they wouldn't be able to protect Xiaoyu and would be punished by Xiao Mo, if they didn't run now, their lives would be lost here. However, they still couldn't escape because Gu Chuan and Yin Hanqing attacked at the same time. One of them had an ice spike pierce through his heart, while the other had a lightning bolt pierce through his head. Their deaths were tragic, but at least they didn't have to suffer as much as their 2 colleagues. "Miss Xiao, where do you want to go?" Yin Qiue asked with a smile. Xiao Yu's legs were already weak. She threw away Yaya in her hands. Although her face was pale, there was at least some color in her face. "Yin Qiue, don't forget that my brother is Xiao Mo," she said fiercely. What kind of person was Yin Qiue? He did as he pleased. He probably really dared to kill her. Little Bun ran out from Yin Hanqing's arms and went to pick up the dying Yaya. Yaya was missing an ear and was bleeding profusely. Little Bun's heart ached. He had just picked up Yaya when Xiaoyu picked her up. Xiaoyu could tell that Xiaoqing cared about the Little Bun, while Yin Qiue cared about Xiaoqing. As long as the Little Bun was in her hands, Yin Qiue wouldn't dare to do anything to her. That way, as long as she could stall until Xiao Mo arrived, she would be safe. "Don't come over. Otherwise, my hands will tremble." Xiaoyu choked Little Bun's neck and suddenly became tough. Xiaoqing's aura instantly turned so cold that it didn't seem like a living person. Previously, she hadn't intended to kill Xiaoyu, because no matter what, she had to think about Yin Qiue. Killing a few lackeys as a warning to Xiaoyu was enough. But now, she really wanted to kill Xiaoyu. No one had ever dared to use the little bun to threaten her. The little bun was her life, and Xiaoyu had really touched her bottom line. Just kill her. Xiao Mo won't dare to do anything. Yin Qiu saw Xiao Qing's expression clearly. He knew Xiao Qing's temper. If he hadn't said this in advance, Xiao Qing would definitely kill Xiaoyu first, and then cut ties with him so that he wouldn't be implicated. How could Yin Qiu tolerate Xiao Qing cutting ties with him just because of Xiaoyu? Who was Xiaoyu? Was she worth the enmity between him and Xiao Qing because of her? She wasn't worthy. If it weren't for the fact that he hadn't fully recovered and couldn't use his ability as he pleased, he would definitely kill Xiaoyu first. He had tolerated Xiaoyu for a long time. Previously, he just didn't want to change places. At least Lin Chuan's survivor base was more stable and suitable for experiments, so he didn't want to offend Xiaomo and didn't make a move on Xiaoyu. He didn't expect that his momentary tolerance would give Xiaoyu the illusion that he didn't dare to provoke her. At this moment, she even wanted to climb over his head. Now that he liked Xiao Qing, he already planned to follow wherever Xiao Qing went. He didn't care whether he would offend Xiaomo or not. Hearing Yin Qiu's words, Xiao Qing swallowed the words she was about to say and looked directly at Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu was so scared that she trembled. She couldn't help but tighten her grip on the little bun. She was so nervous that she didn't notice that the child in her hand didn't seem to be suffocating at all. A pair of yin-yang eyes looked at her calmly and didn't forget to hug the bunny in his arms tightly. Xiao Qing saw very clearly that the little bun would be fine for a while. She slowly approached Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu had touched her bottom line, so she wouldn't let her die so easily. Your son is in my hands. What are you trying to do? Don't come any closer, Xiaoyu said in a panic. As she spoke, Xiaoyu was still backing away. She didn't look like someone who was threatening others at all. Instead, she looked like someone who was being threatened. Xiaoyu was panicking, but Xiao Qing was very calm. She secretly directed the vines to circle around Xiaoyu. Although she was prepared to kill Xiaoyu, that was on the basis that she wanted to save the little bun. Otherwise, she wouldn't do it. Just stand there. If you come any closer, I won't be polite. Before Xiaoyu could finish speaking, Xiao Qing stopped in her tracks. A lush plant bloomed under her feet, and a light fragrance slowly drifted over. Although Xiaoyu was an idiot, she had a powerful brother, so she naturally had some knowledge. She immediately understood that the plant under Xiao Qing's feet was definitely not simple. Put it away. Xiao Qing obediently put away the Qiutang. Because Xiaoyu had already been hit, she swayed weakly and hurriedly bit her lips. Then, she felt a pain in her ankle. When she looked down, she saw that the vines had already bound her feet. Xiaoyu was ruthless and prepared to kill the little bun. Even a cornered dog would jump over a wall. However, her hands were getting weaker and weaker. In the end, she loosened her grip and the little bun fell safely to the ground. Xiao Qing walked over with her military knife. A voice came from afar. Have mercy. Xiao Qing didn't need to look to know that it was Xiao Mo. However, she had no intention of showing mercy. The military knife quickly stabbed down. Chapter 170. Xiao Qing had no intention of stopping. She was determined to take Xiaoyu's life. Let alone Xiao Mo, even if the Heavenly King came, she would kill her first before speaking. However, Xiao Qing couldn't kill Xiaoyu in the end because before Xiao Qing could do anything, Xiaoyu was already living a life worse than death. Little Bun squatted on the ground, hugging Ye with one hand and Xiaoyu's ankle with the other. Green energy could be seen flowing out of Xiaoyu's body. In just a few seconds, Xiaoyu turned into a dried corpse. Her hair was yellow, and she was all skin and bones. Her eyes were bulging, and she looked particularly terrifying. Little Bun jumped into Xiao Qing's arms and complained first. So ugly, Mommy. Baby is scared. Xiao Qing smiled and patted Little Bun's head. She covered his eyes and said, Baby is not scared. After comforting Little Bun, the first thing Xiao Qing did was to call her teammates over. They were ready to break out of the encirclement at any time. She was now an intermediate level 4. After her body was repaired, she gained the ability to control space. Although her control over space wasn't strong and couldn't compare to the Zombie King, with this ability and her wood ability, it would be easy for her to break out of the encirclement. Xiao Mo's expression was a little ugly. He was one step too late. Xiao Yu couldn't be more dead at this moment. The person who killed her was obviously Xiao Qing's group. Surprisingly, the first thing Xiao Mo said when he came over wasn't anger or accusation. His tone was very calm, and it didn't sound like it was his sister who died in front of him at all. It sounded more like an unrelated person. Chiyue, are you preparing to leave? Yin Chiyue nodded. The agreement was very clear. I will leave when I want to. You should still remember this, right? Xiao Mo pondered for a moment and continued to ask, You're not coming back? I don't know. Yin Chiyue's meaning was very clear. He followed Xiao Qing. Wherever Xiao Qing went, he would go. If Xiao Qing didn't come back, he definitely wouldn't come back. Xiao Mo waved his hand, and someone immediately came to carry Xiao Yu's body away. The one who died is my sister. I should have the right to know the reason behind her death. Yin Chiyue glanced at Xiao Qing and briefly recounted what had just happened. It was nothing more than Xiao Yu courting death. If she wasn't Xiao Mo's sister, she would have probably died 1,000 times over. Xiao Mo nodded. I believe you. It's Xiao Yu's fault, so I won't do anything about it. Are you all planning to stay here for a few days, or are you leaving now? At this point, Xiao Qing couldn't help but take another look at him. How magnanimous, how shrewd, and how cold was his personality to be able to do such a thing. His sister was dead, but not only did he not have any intention of taking revenge on the person who killed her, he could even be so amiable. Xiao Qing felt a little cold. With such a temperament, even if he didn't have any abilities, he would still be able to live well in this post-apocalyptic world. Xiao Qing naturally didn't have anything to prepare. She looked at Yin Chiyue, and Yin Chiyue quickly said, I'll go back and pack my things. He had a lot of experimental equipment and results, and they were still at his place. It was fine if he lost his money, but these things couldn't be lost. I'll accompany Chiyue to pack some things. You all can leave the city first. Xiao Qing was still a little worried about Xiao Mo. How could anyone go to this extent? It was possible that Xiao Mo was deliberately putting on an act to make them lower their guard. Feel free to do as you wish. I'll go and deal with my sister's body first. Xiao Mo smiled and left. After walking a distance, the person following him couldn't help but ask, Are you really not going to take revenge for eldest miss? Chapter 171. Xiao Mo didn't say anything, but he was determined to replace her. Xiao Yu was his sister, but they had the same father but different mothers. After his mother died, his father married a stepmother, who gave birth to Xiao Yu. His father died at the beginning of the apocalypse, and his stepmother was killed by Xiao Mo himself. He found dozens of men to kill his stepmother in a small warehouse. In fact, in the end, his stepmother was still breathing. Xiao Mo opened the door and took a look. The charming young woman was already on the verge of death, so he had his men throw his stepmother into the pile of zombies. The reason was that his stepmother had hired people to kill him twice. Xiao Yu didn't know about this. Xiao Mo didn't keep Xiao Yu because of family ties, but purely for fun. He had killed his stepmother with his own hands, but her daughter still called him brother sweetly and even took the initiative to climb into his bed. Xiao Mo didn't refuse and enjoyed this young body. Even if Xiao Yu was his sister and half of their blood flowed in their bodies, Xiao Mo didn't refuse. Therefore, even if Xiao Qing killed Xiao Yu, the first thing on Xiao Mo's mind wasn't revenge, but how to keep Yin Chiyue, and how to reap the greatest benefits when Yin Chiyue was determined to leave. He was such a person. Otherwise, why would he sleep with his own sister? Yin Hanqing and the others didn't leave. They were also worried that Xiao Mo would play dirty tricks, so they accompanied Yin Chiyue to pack up. The experimental equipment was placed in Xiao Qing's space, as well as his little treasury. After packing up, Yin Chiyue didn't even bother to say goodbye to Xiao Mo, and the few of them left. Yin Chiyue thought that he was ruthless, but not as ruthless as Xiao Mo. It was better to stay away from such a person. After leaving Linchuan, the few of them discussed and headed in the direction of Jingdu. Jingdu was the largest survivor base in the country, and it was also the place with the most uniform rules, but also the most chaotic. The more people there were, the more information there would be. Maybe there would be news about Erdai. Probably because they had been separated for too long. The little bun stuck to Xiao Qing and couldn't be removed, so the driver was replaced by Yin Hanqing. The car was a black family car, given by Xiaomo before they left. So when they walked out of Linchuan, everyone's expression was very strange. Have you ever seen someone give you a car after killing someone's sister? Xiaoqing sat in the back with the little bun in her arms, and Ya in the little bun's arms. Ya's head was bandaged into a ball with a bow, and it looked like she had 3 ears. Ya's head. Once little Baozi was in Xiaoqing's arms, he began to talk endlessly. 8 out of 10 sentences would definitely reach Yaya's ears at the end of the sentence. In the end, you're a little girl's SSS, S's 2's. Ya's 2 out of 3 sentences. You don't even say you miss your mother. The little bun immediately pouted and kissed Xiaoqing, firmly and fiercely on Xiaoqing's mouth, and then said in a childish voice, I love Mommy the most. Mommy, I miss you, but Yaya must be painful. Xiaoqing was angry and amused at the same time. She couldn't help but poke the little bun. You little ingrate. Yin Qiue immediately took the opportunity to interrupt. The baby is so cute. He greeted him with a smile, but the little bun pushed him away. The little bun sneered and shouted, Uncle Qing, someone is seducing Mommy. Yin Qiue was confused, and Xiaoqing burst into laughter. She poked the little bun again. Where did you learn these strange words? Seducing Mommy? Chapter 172. Yin Hanqing, on the other hand, blushed. It was said that love rivals would get jealous when they met. Although he and Yin Qiue weren't jealous, both of them knew very well that both of them were interested in Xiaoqing, so it would depend on their own abilities. In comparison, Yin Qiue was at a disadvantage, because little Baozi didn't have a good impression of Yin Qiue. When he looked at Yin Qiue, she looked like one of those evil stepmothers in stories. She also looked like a coquettish fox. Of course, the latter adjective came from Gu Ponpon's description of a certain woman. Little Baozi had learned it and used it flexibly. Therefore, little Baozi was thinking that since everyone wanted to be his stepfather, he had to choose someone he liked. For example, Yin Hanqing, who treated him well and was close to him. Little Baozi had a special place in Xiaoqing's heart. If little Baozi did not like her, Yin Qiue would have to suffer for a long time. After beating little Baozi up, Xiaoqing talked to Yin Hanqing and the others about what had happened recently. At that time, Xiaoqing and the Zombie King jumped into the river together, followed by Air Dai. Then, Yin Pingshan called for reinforcements. After the reinforcements arrived, the first thing they did was to search the river for Xiaoqing and Air Dai. They searched along the river for a long time, but still could not find Xiaoqing. Many people thought that Xiaoqing must be dead, but Yin Pingshan and Meng Shun did not want to give up. At that time, Yin Hanqing and the others also came. After searching for a few days, they had to give up temporarily. Yin Hanqing and the others followed Meng Shun and the others to Linchuan survivor base. After they gathered, they searched along the river. As long as it was a survivor base, they would go in and ask about it. When they arrived at Linchuan survivor base, they were in despair. Unexpectedly, they ran into Xiaoqing when they were about to leave. Xiaoqing also talked about her experiences during this period of time. Naturally, she skimmed over some things that shouldn't be said, and emphasized that Yin Qiue had saved her. Sure enough, as soon as Yin Qiue said that, the people in the car looked at Yin Qiue with much gentler eyes. Xiaoqing's team of superpowered people were all Xiaoqing's closest people. The smaller the team was, the harder it was for newcomers to join, especially when there was competition. However, Yin Qiue was Xiaoqing's savior, so they were very grateful to Yin Qiue, so they were more tolerant of Guning. Even Little Bun's impression of Yin Qiue had changed a little. Of course, if the fact that Yin Qiue beat them to it was exposed, Yin Hanqing and Gu Chuan might tear him apart. In fact, the first person who met Xiaoqing was Air Dai. Air Dai and Xiaoqing had sex once, and those men were all upset, but they also understood that they had no choice in that situation. But Yin Qiue was nothing. To be frank, everything should be done according to the order of first come, first served, right? Why did he want to kill her halfway? He didn't even ask those men who agreed with him. These men were well aware of Xiaoqing's character. They couldn't win her heart just because they could win her body. She was a very opinionated person. The more opinionated she was, the harder it was for others to win her heart in this aspect. Therefore, None of those men tried to give up on Dai. How could they give up on such a woman? It would be a lifelong thing for them. Who would be so stupid to give up on her? The distance from Linchuan to Jingdu wasn't far, but it wasn't close either. After all, the distance was calculated as a straight line. However, there was a mountain between Linchuan Survivor Base and Jingdu Survivor Base. Chapter 173. If you wanted to cross the mountain directly, you couldn't drive an RV. According to the height of the mountain, even if you drove an off-road vehicle, the chassis would be broken. Therefore, it was necessary to take a detour. At night, they slept in the car. Once they put the seats down, they could use it as a bed. Although it was a little narrow, in this post-apocalyptic world, this condition was considered good. Xiaoqing didn't sleep. She sat on the roof of the RV. On the one hand, she was patrolling at night. On the other hand, she couldn't sleep, so she was sewing clothes with the help of the faint moonlight. The python was very long, and the skin was enough to make a protective soft armor for each of them, like a vest. After all, Yin Hanqing and the others were different from Xiaoqing. Although they were paranormals, they would die if their hearts were hit. Therefore, Xiaoqing had to think about how to make them safer. The snake skin was very tough. At the very least, she and Yin Qiue had only left a white mark on the snake's skin after fighting it for a long time. Although the defense of the skin was certainly not as good as when the snake was still alive, ordinary knives and guns couldn't penetrate it. The first thing Xiaoqing made was for Little Bon. He was the one who saved the most material. The small piece of material was enough to make a vest for him. If it were someone else, they might not be able to make the python's skin. Xiaoqing used the thorns from the vines to make a needle. She pierced the needle from the inside and threaded the thread. It was a little troublesome, but the finished product looked good. At 2 o'clock, when everyone was asleep, Yin Qiue suddenly climbed out of the RV and climbed on the roof. Why are you still awake? It's not good for your health if you don't sleep in the middle of the night. Xiaoqing sorted out the rest of the material, then slowly cut a piece. When she cut, she directly used the space crack, which was a special test of her control. It was another special practice for Xiaoqing. After climbing up, Yin Qiue lay down on Xiaoqing's legs. After a while, she said, "Do they all dislike me? I'm just not used to it." Xiaoqing patted his head and comforted him, then said, "After all, not long after the apocalypse, we have been going out on missions together. They will definitely feel uncomfortable if someone suddenly comes in, but they will get used to it." Even Yin Hanqing and the others couldn't wait for him to go back to Linchuan Survivor Base and never come back. They were used to it. Pan and the others are all very nice people. You'll know after getting along with them for a while. You gave up everything to come with me. No matter what, I won't treat you unfairly. Xiaoqing chuckled. She suddenly felt that they were like a poor scholar and a young lady who had eloped in ancient times, but their identities had been swapped. Yin Qiu almost blurted out, "I just want a status." However, he swallowed the words back. Instead, he acted like a spoiled child and rolled around in Xiaoqing's arms. "I have nothing but you. You have to protect me well. Don't let others bully me. After all, I'm so delicate." Xiaoqing wanted to kick him down. If the people in Linchuan Survivor Base heard Yin Qiue's words, they would probably die of anger. "Delicate? Why don't you go to heaven?" "Okay, go back to sleep. It's almost dawn." Xiaoqing kicked Yin Qiue down. He persistently climbed back. "I really can't sleep. Let's talk. For example, Dai." When he mentioned Dai, Xiaoqing was stunned. The corners of her eyes were slightly wet. It wasn't that she was weak, but when she thought of that silly little zombie whose whereabouts were unknown, even her iron heart felt sour. She remembered clearly the days when she was with Dai. Even the awkward expression when Dai was forced to cut her nails was imprinted in her mind. Dai was very silly. Even among zombies, he was definitely the most silly one. Otherwise, why would he be abandoned and come all the way here? But what she cared about was that silly Dai. He didn't know how to speak, nor did he know how to express his feelings. He only knew how to protect her at the moment of life and death. In the end, he even jumped into the river with her. How silly could such a zombie be? Yin Qiue looked at Xiaoqing's appearance and knew that it was not good. He brought up a topic that shouldn't be brought up. He originally wanted to talk to Xiaoqing and talk about their feelings, but now, he brought out the feelings that Xiaoqing had for Air Dai in her heart. There was probably no chance tonight. Yin Qiyu quickly leaned forward and kissed Xiaoqing. "Good night. I'm going to sleep first. Then I'll go back to the car." Xiaoqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She was too lazy to make any more soft armor. She threw away the materials and lay on the roof of the car, wanting to look at the stars. But in this weather, even the moonlight in the sky was hazy. There were no stars. In the past, she and Air Dai were on the night watch together. Air Dai would always stick to her. It was lively, not as cold and lonely as it was now. On the other side, as soon as Yin Qiyu got back to the car, he saw several pairs of eyes staring at him like wolves, which directly scared him. Especially Gu Panpan. She directly moved to Gu Chuan's side and whispered, "Only crying children can drink milk." "Brother, why are you so stupid?" Yin Qiyu was speechless. Gu Chuan just glanced at Gu Panpan, then lay down and continued to sleep. However, Yin Hanqing got up. As soon as he got up, Gu Panpan and Yin Qiyu both stared at him. As expected, Yin Hanqing climbed onto the roof of the car. The two immediately pricked up their ears, fearing that Yin Hanqing would do something beastly. "Why did you line up to chat with me tonight?" Xiaoqing moved her butt and made space for Yin Hanqing. Yin Hanqing just put the coat on Xiaoqing and said, "It's windy at night, and it's uncomfortable. Why don't you go back to the car? You should be fine." Xiaoqing tightened the coat, and the faint loneliness and pretentiousness in her heart disappeared with the wind. Chapter 174. On the third day, they were supposed to arrive at the survivor base in the capital. However, they encountered a small accident on the way. It was a full moon, and the zombies were rioting. Even Xiaoqing and Little Bun were inevitably affected. Little Bun was fine, as he was only at level 2. His strength was not high, so he was less affected. However, Xiaoqing was already at level 4. The higher the level, the greater the influence. She had not yet lost her mind, but at this rate, it would be difficult for her to control her various impulses when she reached level 6. Moreover, Xiaoqing had touched flesh and blood. Once the desire for flesh and blood broke out, it was difficult to control. Fortunately, her willpower was very strong, and she suppressed this impulse. Although Yin Qiyu was very willing to provide blood for Xiaoqing, once it became an addiction, it was not a good thing for Xiaoqing. After the night of the full moon, it could be said that there was a desolation everywhere. After all, it was not only the zombies that were rioting, but also the mutant animals. Xiaoqing asked Xiaotong to search around with her spiritual power. After finding no particularly strong zombies around, they continued to move forward. After walking for a few miles, they saw a group of people. A group of people with ragged clothes and bloodstains. At first glance, they knew that they had experienced a fierce battle. They were clustered around a young man and a young woman. The two people looked very embarrassed, but they were much better than the people around them. As soon as they saw Xiaoqing's car driving over, their eyes lit up. They hurried forward to stop the car. They were so fast that they almost hit the car. As soon as the car stopped, someone knocked on the window. Sitting in the front passenger seat was Yin Qiyu. He opened the window and asked, "What's the matter?" The underlying meaning was that if there was nothing, hurry up and get out of the way. The man's expression stiffened. Before he could say anything, the young girl behind him walked over and pushed him away. Her eyes were sparkling as she said, "It's like this. We encountered a zombie tide last night. We used up all our supplies. Can we buy some from you?" Yin Qiyu turned around and glanced at Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing nodded. It was not a big deal to sell them some food and water. It was a small favor, so she would help if she could. "Market price, how much do you want?" Yin Qiyu asked lazily. The girl calculated for a moment, then said, "If it's water, 3 bottles will be enough. We need food for 5 people, 5 level 2 zombie nuclei, and 8 level 1 zombie nuclei. Is that okay?" The young girl's price was already very fair. Yin Qiyu nodded and took out the portion she wanted and made a deal with the young girl. After the deal was done, Yin Qiyu patiently waited for the young girl to leave. However, the young girl did not leave. Instead, she asked shyly, "We don't have any transportation. You are going to the survival base in the capital. Can we hitch a ride? My family is in the capital. If you can help, you will be rewarded generously. Normally, Xiaoqing would definitely refuse. It was not a wise choice to let a group of strangers get on the car. However, she urgently needed a few people who were familiar with the survival base in the capital. It would be easier for her to find the air dye. These people happened to come, which saved her the time to search for them after arriving in the capital. Even if they had bad intentions, they would not be able to do anything to her. This was the confidence brought by the ultimate power. Therefore, Xiaoqing calmly gave Yin Qiyu a look. Yin Qiyu agreed, get on. The young girl was very happy. She looked at Yin Qiyu with a bit of ambiguity. On the contrary, the young man looked at Yin Qiyu coldly. Chapter 175. The five of them got into the car one after another. Although the interior of the caravan was very spacious, it was still a little crowded with 5 more people. The girl was stunned as soon as she got into the car. Yin Qiyu was very good-looking with exquisite features. However, when she got into the car, she realized that there were 2 other men in the car whose looks were not inferior to Yin Qiyu's. One of them was Yin Hanqing. He was the kind of man who was handsome with a hint of toughness. In addition, he had a special temperament cultivated from years of military service. He was also the best among men. Although Gu Chuan was silent, no one would not notice him. He was between Yin Hanqing and Yin Qiyu. He had a delicate coldness, but he did not lose his heroic spirit. The biggest similarity between the 3 men was that they were all very handsome. How handsome were they? The young man was also quite handsome, but he was like a speck of dust compared to the 3 of them. Especially when the 4 of them sat together, the huge gap suddenly became obvious, which made the young man's already pale face even paler. Xiaoqing, who was surrounded by the 3 men, was very calm. She hugged Little Bon and sat inwards, making some space for them. Only then did they manage to sit steadily in the car. Yin Hanqing continued to drive forward. The girl's gaze stopped on Little Bon in Xiaoqing's arms, and then she deliberately asked, "What a cute baby. Your husband must be very outstanding to be able to give birth to such a good-looking baby." Xiaoqing smiled slightly. "He's already dead." The girl immediately heaved a sigh of relief, but in the blink of an eye, that sigh of relief returned. Although the few people in the car were all handsome men, she liked Yin Qiyu the most. The moment the window opened and the girl saw Yin Qiyu, she made up her mind to chase after him. If the child in Xiaoqing's arms was Yin Qiyu's, it would be very difficult to deal with. Fortunately, it was not. She also found out that Xiaoqing was a widow. In this way, Xiaoqing's threat was reduced a lot. It was just a lot smaller, but it didn't mean that it was gone. After all, Xiaoqing was Yin Qiyu's partner. Who knew if she had any other relationship with Yin Qiyu? However, the girl was very confident. In terms of looks, she didn't think she was any worse than Xiaoqing. In terms of strength, she was already a level 3 paranormal. In terms of strength, her father was the leader of a large mercenary group. More importantly, she was young. No matter how she looked at it, she would definitely beat Xiaoqing. Speaking of this, it was necessary to talk about the mercenary system. The mercenary system in Jingdu was similar to the superpowered team in the survivor base of S-City. It could be said that the mercenary group was the evolved version of the superpowered team. In Jingdu, a superpowered team with less than 50 people was considered a superpowered team, and more than 50 people could form a mercenary group. People like Xiaoqing, who had less than 10 people in a superpowered team, could be said to be countless in Jingdu. Many superpowered teams would not choose to recruit new members after losing members. Instead, they would directly disband and join a mercenary group. After chatting with Xiaoqing for a while, the girl patted her chest and promised, "My father has formed a mercenary group. It has been established for a long time, and it is quite powerful in Jingdu. If you go to Jingdu, I will be your tour guide. If you want to stay in Jingdu, you can also join my family's mercenary group. I can ask my father to give you a position, and the lowest one will be a team leader." Xiaoqing just smiled and didn't say anything. After a few more words with Xiaoqing, the girl turned her head and talked to Yin Qiyu. When she was talking to Yin Qiyu, the young man beside her kept looking at Yin Qiyu with a sinister look. Xiaoqing couldn't help but frown. This girl named Kai Ying was obviously interested in Yin Chiyue, and the young man beside her seemed to have a good relationship with Kai Ying. It was very likely that they were lovers. Chapter 176. However, Kai Ying had already brazenly approached Yin Chiyue, and the young man still did not dare to say anything. Then, there were only two possibilities. The first was that he was timid. This possibility was not big. After all, not many men would not react when they were about to be cuckolded. Moreover, it was right in front of them. Secondly, he was a kept man, so he didn't dare to say anything about his sugar daddy's behavior. He vented his anger on Yin Chiyue not because he loved Kai Ying, but because he was afraid that Yin Chiyue would steal his sugar daddy. A girl who kept a man as a kept man was definitely not a good match for Yin Chiyue. Xiao Qing frowned. She didn't realize that she was subconsciously rejecting this matter. Yin Chiyue didn't care about this girl at all. He didn't even bother to answer her perfunctorily. In the beginning, he responded, but in the end, he was annoyed. So he closed his eyes and lay on the seat, covering his ears. It was said that a group of women was equal to 500 ducks. Kai Ying alone was equal to 500 ducks. Since Kai Ying got in the car, the atmosphere in the car was very strange. At noon, when it was time for lunch, a group of people got out of the car and dispersed. Kai Ying was determined to chase Yin Chiyue. Wherever Yin Chiyue went, she would follow him. I'm going to hunt something. You can start a fire first. Xiao Qing waved her hand and went out with Xiao Tong. Xiao Tong wasn't as good at searching as Meng Shan. She was good at defense and attack, but she was still much better than ordinary people. For example, now she could release her spiritual power to detect whether there were mutated animals nearby. When she determined the location, Xiao Qing could directly go and hunt. There were many people this time, so Xiao Qing deliberately walked a little longer to hunt more prey. However, she didn't expect to meet a wild boar. Wild boars were rare and usually lived in some deep mountains. However, after Doomsday, those animals had been mutated and their abilities were greatly enhanced. They could be found everywhere. Xiao Qing naturally wouldn't let go of such a good prey. She tied it up and dragged it back. The fresher the meat, the tastier it was. Therefore, Xiao Qing didn't kill it, but tied it up with vines. Unexpectedly, Little Bun insisted on keeping the wild boar when she dragged it back. Yaya was fine. Yaya was a small rabbit, so it was fine to carry it around. However, the wild boar was so big. Where could he keep it? Would he have to tie it to the back of the car in the future and drag it when he ran for his life? That would be a joke. Therefore, Xiao Qing and Little Bun squatted in front of the wild boar. Xiao Qing said to Little Bun sternly, "You can't keep it." Little Bun pouted. His big eyes were misty, and he looked very pitiful. Why? Mama had never rejected him. This was the first time. Did Mama not love him anymore? Because Yaya will be jealous. Xiao Qing patted Little Bun's head and said, "Do you like Yaya?" Little Bun said crisply, "Yes." If you like Yaya, you have to be wholehearted. Since you have another pet, shouldn't you divide your love into two parts? Yaya will be sad. Xiao Qing said patiently. Little Bun was enlightened. He looked at the wild boar and then looked at Yaya. No matter how he looked at it, Yaya was cuter. He immediately abandoned the wild boar. All right, I won't raise it. After that, Little Bun sneakily leaned over and said, "Mama, you already have Dazai. You have to be wholehearted. You can't share your love with Yin Chiyue. Otherwise, Dazai will be sad." Xiao Qing looked at the Little Bun's serious face and couldn't help but laugh. "You're so mischievous. Go play somewhere else. Mommy is going to prepare the food." Chapter 177. Little Baozi ran away with his Yaya. Xiao Qing pulled out the knife and cut the blood. She removed the skin and bones, took out the internal organs, and put them aside. She cut the skin and meat, marinated some of them, and sliced the rest into slices. How about barbecue for lunch today? Xiao Qing found a large iron plate and placed the meat neatly on it. In addition to the pork, there was also chicken and rabbit meat. They were placed separately and filled the plate. Since she said that she would eat like this, naturally no one objected. Yin Hanqing went straight to the car to take out the grill and set it up with Yin Chiyue. Gu Chuan took the prepared charcoal and Gu Panpan carried the seasoning out. Even Xiao Tong and Xiao Qing cleaned the meat slices together. Kai Yingying and the others were stunned when they saw them working together. There were some who took their children out, but they had never seen a group of paranormals who lived like a tourist during the apocalypse and had picnics every day. Especially Xiao Qing and the others, they had everything. It was obvious that they were experienced. It was not the first time they did this. Xiao Qing cut the meat into a medium thickness. The thicker ones were used to barbecue, and the thinner ones were boiled on an iron plate. They could be dipped in the sauce and eaten. Xiao Qing did not waste the internal organs. She cleaned the edible parts and stored them. They could be eaten after cooking them in the evening. After that, 3 big plates of meat slices were placed in front of the group. There was half a wild boar and several small wild animals. It was enough for a few more people. The barbecue rack was set up, the charcoal was heated, and the seasoning like cumin was put on one side. Xiao Qing began to barbecue. The group of people sat around, each holding a bowl. Once the meat was cooked, Xiao Qing would sprinkle the seasoning on it and give it to them. In the beginning, Kai Yingying and the others were still a little reserved and embarrassed to reach out their bowls. Later, they reached out faster than anyone else. After all, Xiao Qing's roasting speed was very fast. If they were late, there would be no more food. Wild boar meat was more chewy and tasted better than domestic boar meat. This mutated wild boar tasted even better. After being roasted, there was a layer of golden oil on the surface. With seasoning sprinkled on it, it tasted fresh and fragrant, making people almost swallow their tongues. The chicken and rabbit meat were also very tasty and were especially popular among the younger ones. Xiao Qing also roasted some meat slices until they were almost cooked and dipped them in the sauce. Yin Shiyue especially liked this way of eating. The dipping sauce was made by Xiao Qing herself, and it tasted very good. Yin Shiyue finished a pile of meat slices by herself. They ate happily, but Xiao Qing didn't stop. When she was almost done with the barbecue, she took out a wild boar leg. She roasted it directly over the fire and brushed oil on it as she roasted it. In the later stage, she didn't need to brush it anymore because the golden oil would come out by itself. Some oil dripped into the fire, and with a sizzle, there was a burnt smell. The group of people who were eating immediately raised their heads and stared at the boar leg. The boar leg had been roasted until it was golden and crispy. Xiao Qing cut it with a knife, and the white and tender meat could be seen steaming from the cut. She sat there and cut a piece, dipped it in the sauce, and ate it. In fact, the meat didn't taste much in her mouth, and she would spit it out later. However, after not eating for a long time, she felt like she was no longer human. Although Xiao Qing wasn't a living person, she was unwilling to admit that she was already a monster in her heart. Yin Shiyue immediately came over quietly. He blinked his beautiful eyes and looked at the boar leg in Xiao Qing's hand. Xiao Qing sliced a few pieces and put them in his bowl. After Yin Shiyue ate it, he continued to stare at the boar leg in Xiao Qing's hand. Xiao Qing couldn't help but laugh and scold. "Look at you. Aren't there some roasted meat slices over there? Go eat that. It's not as fragrant as the one in your hand." Yin Shiyue said matter-of-factly, "Anyway, it's such a big leg. You definitely can't finish it. I'll help you finish it." "Go away. Who needs you to finish it?" Xiao Qing pointed at the small pot at the side. "Don't eat too much. Leave some space in your stomach. There's still a pot of soup for you to finish." Yin Shiyue, QAQ. Chapter 178. After solving the problem of lunch, the group continued to move forward. Along the way, Kai Yingying was telling them about the Jingdu survivor base. Xiao Qing listened quietly, occasionally asking questions that were neither painful nor itchy. Slowly, they got to the bottom of the story. There were a total of 4 top mercenary groups in the Jingdu survivor base. Kai Yingying's family's mercenary group had more than 300 people, and more than 200 of them were ability users. However, in Jingdu, they weren't even ranked near the top, let alone the top. They could only be considered above average. Among the 4 mercenary groups, one of them was made up entirely of beautiful women. The leader was Wu Jiaojiao, and the mercenary group was named after her nickname, Thorns and Roses. Although Thorns and Roses wasn't the strongest among the 4 mercenary groups, the charm of beautiful women was great. A group of beautiful women was enough to make many people willing to go through fire and water for them, so very few people were willing to offend them. The second mercenary group was famous for its numbers. There were nearly 1,000 people in this mercenary group, and among them, there were 500 to 600 paranormals. The leader was a metal paranormal. This mercenary group was called Mad Demon. There were no requirements to join the mercenary group. As long as you were a paranormal, you would be accepted. The third mercenary group was called Ice. There were more than 100 people in the group, and they walked the path of the elite. Among the 100 or so people, 100 of them were paranormals, and all of them were above level 2. The leader was said to be an Ice paranormal. The last mercenary group was more strange. There were only a few dozen people in the group, but it was ranked as one of the top 4 mercenary groups in the Kyoto. It was said that among the dozens of people in the group, the weakest was a level 3 paranormal. Every one of them had a unique skill. They kept a record in the Kyoto, and that was, they had a 100% completion rate for all the missions they took. This was undoubtedly very scary. The top mercenary groups in the Kyoto definitely had one thing in common, and that was that there was at least one level 4 paranormal in the group. It was said that the leader and deputy leader of the last mercenary group, Darkthorn, were both level 4 paranormals, and the leader was only one step away from level 5. Xiaoqing thought that her strength had improved very quickly, but in the end, she found that there was always someone better than her. Kai Ying's family's mercenary group was called Storm. Although it wasn't as awesome as the other mercenary groups, it was still a large mercenary group with 300 members. Therefore, Kai Ying was still very proud of it. Perhaps it was because both males and females wanted to show off in front of the person they liked. Kai Ying had indeed revealed a lot this time. Previously, she had let Xiaoqing know that her strength was among the top in the capital. For example, in Kai Ying's family, the strongest person was her father, who was currently a level 3 paranormal. As long as he broke through to level 4, their mercenary group would truly step into the ranks of first-rate mercenary groups. In addition to the mercenary group, there was one more thing to note. Kyoto was still under the control of the country's leaders, so the rules in Kyoto were relatively complete. There were also simple laws. In general, it was stricter than the average survivor base, but also more stable than those extremely chaotic bases. Therefore, the population of Kyoto survivor base was equal to 2 Linchuan survivor bases, and the population of S-City survivor base was even more incomparable. After learning about Kyoto, it was almost afternoon. Xiaoqing and the others stopped to rest for the night. Dinner was still prepared by Xiaoqing. In fact, Xiaoqing liked to cook. More importantly, Yin Hanqing was her assistant, so Xiaoqing didn't need to do anything. Therefore, she was able to cook very quickly. Chapter 179. After making soup, they were full and ready to sleep. There was too little space in the car, so it was not suitable to continue sleeping in the car. They had to set up tents. However, there were only 2 tents. Even if they were set up, they could not fit more than 10 people. Therefore, someone had to sleep in the car. It was safer in the car. In the end, it was decided that Little Bun, Xiao Tong, Gu Pan Pan, and Yin Shue would sleep in the car. The others would sleep in the tents. Xiaoqing's people had a tent, and Kai Ying's people had a tent. Xiaoqing was still responsible for the night watch. In the first half of the night, a man from each side was responsible for the night watch. In the second half of the night, Xiaoqing was responsible for the night watch. Xiaoqing also slept in the car in the first half of the night. After 12 o'clock, she went out to change shifts with the other 2 people. Xiaoqing slept soundly until midnight, then got up to change shifts. In fact, there was no danger in the vicinity, because they were not far from the capital. In this location, the ordinary zombies had been cleared, unless there were wandering zombies or mutated animals, but the number would be very small. Therefore, the so-called night watch actually meant that they did not sleep at night and paid attention to the surrounding situation. If they were really sleepy, there was no danger in taking a nap. Xiaoqing was a very responsible person, and she did not need to sleep, so naturally, she would not be lazy. In the early morning, Xiaoqing sat on a big branch, swinging her legs to enjoy the night wind. Suddenly, a person sneaked out of the tent. At this moment, there were 2 people outside. One was Yin Shue, who was peeing, and the other was Xiaoqing. As soon as the person came out, Xiaoqing noticed. After all, she was quite conspicuous. Yin Qiyu did not notice that he was sleepily behind the tree, and then took out, cough cough, peeing. While he was peeing, he was suddenly hugged from behind. Yin Qiyu, who was still in a daze, was startled and almost did not want to do anything. As soon as he was hugged, the first thing Yin Qiyu did was to pull up his pants, stuff his baby, and then break away from the hug. Yin Qiyu was very careful. As soon as the person hugged him from behind, he came to the conclusion that it was definitely not Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing would not do such a thing, and she was taller than the person behind him. After confirming that it was not Xiaoqing, it did not matter who the person behind him was, because as long as it was not Xiaoqing, even if the emperor came, he would not be hugged. Kohong, his body and spirit, they were both his wife. No one should even think about touching it. After shaking her off, Yin Qiyu heard a muffled groan. He turned around and saw Kai Yingying squatting behind him with a pitiful look on her face. She held onto her ankle and said, "I sprained it." When she said this, Kai Yingying's expression was very fragile, and she looked very pitiful. At least, she could arouse all kinds of desires in men, such as the desire to protect, to conquer, and so on. Among normal men, 9 out of 10 would not be able to stand such a delicate beauty like her acting coquettishly. The remaining one was called Yin Qiyu. He was very calm. "What are you doing?" Kai Ying had never seen a man who did not know how to take care of women. He was simply unromantic to the extreme. The beauty was already so obvious. Why was he still pretending to be serious? Wasn't it obvious what she meant? In the middle of the night, a man and a woman alone. What else could they do? Did she have to say it out loud? Kai Ying's face was a little red. Although she was a very bold girl, she would still be very shy if she said something like asking for sex, okay? Yin Qiyu was exceptionally cold. "You should go back to sleep." Chapter 180. Kai Ying's originally rosy face turned a little pale. She said with some difficulty, "Qiyu, you know what I mean." Yin Qiyu said very calmly, "I said you should go back to sleep." Wasn't it an obvious rejection? Kai Ying had never been rejected so ruthlessly in her life. While she was a little embarrassed, she was also a little angry. "Why did you reject me? Am I not good looking? Or do you mind if I have another boyfriend? He's just a dispensable existence. His existence is just to make me happy. If you mind, I can kick him away immediately." Don't be mistaken, okay? I have no interest in you at all, so isn't it natural to reject you? Yin Qiyue's lips had a cold smile. He tilted his head. If it wasn't because Xiaoqing was about to go to the capital and he didn't want to cause trouble for Xiaoqing, he would have already pulled out the tongue of this chattering little girl. Kai Ying's face turned even paler. She couldn't help but cover her mouth. It looked like she was about to cry. After a while, she had a flash of inspiration. "You have someone you like, right? That's why you rejected me." Yin Qiyu didn't say anything. This was the truth. He didn't need to explain anything. Did he need a reason to dislike someone? If he really had to find a reason, it would be that she was the best one he had ever seen. Who would be willing to compromise? Moreover, he had not only seen her, but also had her. So he was even more unwilling to compromise. How am I worse than her? Kai Ying didn't need to think to know who Yin Qiyu liked. There were only 4 women in this group, including her. Although Gu Panpan's appearance was delicate and pretty, she had a carefree personality. Xiao Tong could also be considered pretty, but she was mute. Although Xiao Qing was a widow, she was too beautiful. Kai Ying knew that in terms of appearance, she was definitely not worse than Xiao Qing. However, there was one area where she was not as good as Xiao Qing, and that was her temperament. Temperament was something that couldn't be forced. It was gradually cultivated and tempered by time. Only then would it have its current fragrance. Therefore, there were many women who, even if they were no longer beautiful, still had an intoxicating temperament. That was why there was the term, still charming. Xiao Qing was such a woman. She was good-looking and had an outstanding temperament. Even if she was a widow, many men would like her. But Kai Ying just couldn't understand. "I don't look worse than her, and she's a widow. I've never married. I'm still young. Why do you like her but don't want to be with me?" Yin Chiyue's expression immediately turned ugly. These words were particularly harsh to him. He really wanted to say, "How is Xiaoqing worse than you? Who gave you the confidence to compare yourself with Xiaoqing? You can't even compare to one of her little toes, okay?" Yin Chiyue didn't even have the desire to talk to Kai Ying. He walked forward with a cold face. Yin Chiyue felt that if he stayed any longer, he would really not be able to control himself and kill Kai Ying. That would bring a lot of trouble to Xiaoqing. Although he was never afraid of trouble, he didn't want to bring any trouble to Xiaoqing. "I'll give you two choices. First, shut your mouth now and go back to sleep. Second, I'll let you sleep forever." Yin Chiyue curled his lips. When he said this, his expression was exceptionally cold and sinister, with a hint of gorgeousness. This kind of Yin Chiyue was simply dazzling to look at, but also so dangerous that it made people's hands and feet turn cold. Kai Ying bit her lower lip and said confidently, "You won't kill me." Even if it was because of her identity, Yin Chiyue wouldn't do it. Although she said so, Kai Ying clearly felt Yin Chiyue's murderous intent. He really wanted to kill her. This thought made Kai Ying very discouraged. It was the first time in her life that she liked someone so much. It was also the first time she wanted someone so badly. However, this person only wanted to kill her. Wasn't this a very desperate thing? Really? Just because of your identity? The coldness in Yin Chiyue's eyes was released without any scruples. If she really annoyed him, killing a person would really be like eating and drinking. However, Kai Ying was quite sensible. When she saw Yin Chiyue's expression getting colder and colder, she knew that his patience was about to reach its limit. Kai Ying didn't dare to challenge Yin Chiyue's bottom line. She got up and ran away. When she was about to leave, she said very seriously, "I won't give up." The more dangerous a man was, the more impulsive she was to conquer him. Yin Chiyue rubbed his forehead and felt like he was about to collapse. Soon, his hand stiffened because Xiaoqing's joking voice came from behind him. "You're very popular. It's just that you're too cold to girls." Wait. Did Xiaoqing hear everything just now? QAQ. Chapter 181. Yin Chiyue immediately turned around and opened his arms. "It's cold on the tree. Come down first." Xiaoqing jumped down, but she didn't want to jump into his arms. Yin Chiyue was a little unhappy, but he hugged Xiaoqing. "You know I like you. Why are you making fun of me?" Xiaoqing blushed and pushed Yin Chiyue. "Go back to sleep. It's already midnight," and Xiaoqing glanced at Yin Chiyue. He came out to pee, wearing only a shirt and pants. He looked elegant, but he didn't have any warmth. Especially after Doomsday, the temperature at night would drop very low. Even paranormals with good physiques would bring light foldable tents in the wild. Yin Chiyue really wanted to spend some time alone with Xiaoqing. Since Xiaoqing joined her friends, they didn't have the chance to be alone. It was too hard for Yin Chiyue, who was like a teddy bear. Sob, 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 sob. It was okay that they didn't have the time to be together, but it turned from a world of 5 or 6 people to a world of more than 10 people. Yin Chiyue only wanted to kill all the people who hindered him from pursuing his wife. However, he still suppressed his dark thoughts. No matter what, at least he couldn't cause trouble for Xiaoqing. Yin Chiyue looked at the sky and couldn't help but lean forward and secretly kiss Xiaoqing before returning to the tent. Xiaoqing touched her face and let him go. She found a place where she could take shelter from the wind and see the surroundings clearly and continued to stay there. The next day, Kai Ying was obviously colder than yesterday, but it could be seen that she didn't give up. After walking for nearly 2.5 hours, they saw the gate of Jingdu. The north gate of Jingdu was very retro. It was said that it was built by an emperor. In short, it looked quite magnificent. The flow of people at the gate of Jingdu was much more than other survivor bases, and the line was longer than other bases. However, Xiaoqing and the others were led by Kai Ying and the others, so they didn't need to line up at all. They just cut the line, registered, and entered Jingdu's survivor base. They were paranormals from other bases, so it was more convenient than those who didn't register in any base. At least their origin was clearer, and they didn't have to fill in anything when they registered. Jingdu was indeed the largest survivor base in the country. After entering, they felt different. It was bustling with people and dense stalls on both sides of the road. It was a little more prosperous than other bases. It had been a long time since Doomsday. Most of the country's areas had stabilized. The survivors' bases built by humans accommodated most of the survivors, and those cities were almost all occupied by zombies. The only survivor base built in a city was in Kyoto, which was one of the reasons why Kyoto had a special status. After all, even if all the cities had fallen, people didn't want Jingdu to fall into the hands of those monsters. Jingdu was now the religion of many people. After surviving, many survivors rushed to Jingdu, which was why there were so many people in Jingdu. Is this your first time in Jingdu? Kai Yingying's smile was a little stiff. After all, she was still young and couldn't be without embarrassment in front of people who had rejected her. Xiao Qing nodded. Even though she had seen a lot of the world, she still sighed. She didn't expect to see such a prosperous place after Doomsday. Chapter 182. Let me show you around first. Don't leave. Come to my house. I want to thank you. Kai Yingying smiled. The others agreed. The paranormals who escorted Kai Yingying were from her mercenary group. They were sent back home by Kai Yingying as soon as they arrived in Jingdu. Only a young man with a gloomy expression looked at Yin Chiue. This young man was called Lu Yusen. He was Kai Yingying's boyfriend in name, but in fact, he was Kai Yingying's gigolo. Lu Yusen's appearance was not bad. Otherwise, Kai Yingying would not have taken a fancy to him. However, the men he met in the past few days were all outstanding. His appearance was not bad, but compared with a few men, he was like dust in the ground. Lu Yusen was afraid. He didn't have any abilities, so he could only rely on his face to make a living. It was really difficult to find a generous and good-tempered sugar daddy like Kai Yingying in Jingdu. However, a man appeared out of nowhere and wanted to steal his job. This man was much better looking than him. How could Lu Yusen not be nervous? How could he not hate him? Every time he saw Yin Chiue, he couldn't wait to push him into a pile of zombies. How could a paranormal steal a sugar daddy from an ordinary person? What Lu Yusen was most afraid of now was that Kai Yingying won Yin Chiue's heart and then threw him away. At that time, where would he go to cry? To be honest, women were a vulnerable group in the post-apocalyptic world. However, there were many capable and powerful women, such as the boss of Thorns and Roses, Wu Jiaojiao. However, the more capable a woman was, the more powerful she was. She was used to the dirty things in the post-apocalyptic world. Her heart and hands were more ruthless than men. Women like Kai Yingying didn't need to rely on others. She relied on her father to live a good life. Therefore, Kai Yingying was well protected. She hadn't seen the dirty things in the post-apocalyptic world. Therefore, her personality was relatively good. Even if she was a little arrogant, she was much easier to serve than those ruthless women. Lu Yusen didn't want to change his sugar daddy. When he heard that Kai Yingying wasn't going to part ways with these people and was even going to be their tour guide, Lu Yusen was a little anxious. He couldn't help but say, "Yingying, if you don't go back, your father will be worried. Why are you so troublesome?" Kai Yingying glared at him. "If you have something to do, you can go back first. By the way, tell my father that I'm hanging out with my friends." Lu Yusen immediately stopped talking. It was better for him to follow. At least he could watch how things developed. No matter what the result was, he could feel more at ease. After reprimanding Lu Yusen, Kai Yingying smiled and said, "The Kyoto survivor base is divided into 5 major parts. The most central part is where all the high-ranking officials live. The east side is where all the major mercenary groups live. The east side is where all the paranormals live. The east side is where all the paranormals live. The west side is where the ordinary people live. Although this area is almost destroyed, there are many tents, and they don't need to pay rent. The south side is where the training ground and storage center are, and the north side is near the gate. So the mission center, the market, and the police station are all here. The place we are going to is the shopping street." After Kai Yingying's explanation, Xiaoqing and the others understood the situation of the whole capital. For example, the police station in the capital was like an official team of paranormals in other survivor bases. It was responsible for patrolling the base and dealing with some special situations. It was similar to the police, but it also acted as an army. Chapter 183. What was different from the ordinary police force was that the police station here was made up of mutants, and they were not low-level mutants. The official mutants would not be included in the ranks of the top 4 or 5 mercenary groups, but their strength was definitely not to be underestimated. Otherwise, they would not be able to suppress these mercenary groups. Xiaoqing was eager to give it a try. Setting up a mercenary group seemed like a great idea. Oh, what should her mercenary group be called? After thinking for a long time, Xiaoqing realized that the 2 words baby Meng were what she liked the most. However, it was too troublesome to set up a mercenary group. Moreover, there were only a few people in her team. Even if there were new members joining in the future, there would not be more than a dozen of them. What kind of mercenary group was that? The market in the capital was exceptionally lively. The few shopping streets that were very famous before the apocalypse were now occupied by various shops. Those who had money and strength would rent a shop, while those who did not would set up stalls on both sides of the street. There were all kinds of things being sold. Some sold clothes and jewelry, some sold guns and ammunition, some sold cold weapons such as daggers, some sold medicine, and even mutated animals and plants. Although those mutated animals and plants were very lethal, there were some more special animals that could be domesticated. For example, dogs. Even after mutating, many dogs still maintained a high degree of loyalty. After being domesticated, they could help their owners fight zombies. However, only the rich could afford to raise them, because mutated animals ate a lot of food. As for mutant plants, they were generally sold to wood-type paranormals. Many wood-type paranormals were relatively weak in the beginning, especially those who took the support route. Such paranormals either had their own teams to help them obtain mutant plants, or they could only buy them themselves. Xiaoqing was very curious. The mutated plants that she had subdued were all rare species, especially her vines. Although they existed when she awakened her ability, they were especially powerful. Not only could they level up with her, but they could also absorb other plants. Her vines had the highest potential among all her plants. Although she didn't have enough space to tame other plants, Xiaoqing still wanted to see what the plants sold in these shops looked like. Kaiying saw that Xiaoqing was looking at the shop on the street, so she led them in. The business in the shop was average. After all, a wood-type paranormal only needed 1 plant per level. As soon as they walked in, someone came up to them and asked, "What kind of mutant plants are you looking for? We have both attack and support." Xiaoqing glanced around. "Let me take a look first." Most of the mutant plants were covered in glass bottles, and each bottle had a label on it. The label contained the name of the mutant plant and its abilities. Xiaoqing glanced around and fixed her gaze on a long, winding vine that looked like a snake. Then, she looked at the label. This kind of vine was called snake vine. Its ability was to entangle and release poison, but it was relatively fragile. It could entangle level 1 zombies, and the poison it released could paralyze level 1 paranormals. 1 second, Xiaoqing was a bit embarrassed. Level 1 paranormals? 1 second? What was the use of that? She had to look at the rest. Next to her, there was a pot that looked like a flower with a light bulb in the middle. The plant's ability was to release a strong light in an instant, blinding people. The effect was very similar to a flash bomb. But generally, zombies didn't rely on their vision to find people. This thing was useless against zombies, but against humans, it could only flash for a moment and occupy a spot. What was the use of that? Chapter 184. Next to it was a black sawtooth grass. Its leaves were thin and long, with teeth. The label said that it was deadly poisonous. What was the use of poison? Apart from being poisonous, this kind of grass didn't have any other ability. Did it expect people to cut their fingers on the sawtooth of the grass? If it met a strength-type mutant, it probably wouldn't even be able to cut it. However, Xiaoqing felt that this grass was still useful. For example, it could be used to squeeze out its juice and smear it on weapons. However, one grass could only be used a few times. It couldn't be used for its poisonous effect, so in the end, it was still useless. More importantly, these plants were very expensive. A useless snake vine was priced at 100 crystal nuclei. The current currency was nuclei. Generally, the price was level 1 nuclei. A level 2 nucleus was equivalent to 10 level 1 nuclei. As for level 3 nuclei and above, it couldn't be measured by this conversion. After all, level 3 nuclei and above were too difficult to obtain. Zombies were generally stronger than humans because they were not afraid of pain. Even if they lost 3 limbs, they could still crawl over and bite people. Therefore, when a paranormal of the same level encountered a zombie of the same level, it was usually the human who retreated. However, if they fought with their lives on the line, humans were still stronger than zombies. Because humans were more intelligent than zombies, if they fought with their lives on the line, the paranormal's chances of winning were higher. In order to obtain level 3 nuclei and above, several high-level paranormal had to kill 1 or 2 zombies at the same time. Only then would the success rate be higher. Therefore, when it came to level 3 nuclei and above, it couldn't be said that 1 nucleus could be exchanged for 10 level 2 nuclei, because the price was not equal. When the paranormal strength was generally improved, level 3 nuclei would be classified as the most common currency. However, even if level 1 zombie nuclei were everywhere, 100 of them was not a small number. One should know that 100 level 1 zombie nuclei could be exchanged for a few hundred kilograms of food. How long would a few hundred kilograms of food be enough for a family? This snake vine was relatively cheap. Xiaoqing asked specifically and found out that this snake vine had the chance to evolve with the paranormal strength, so it was a little more expensive. Xiaoqing suddenly felt that she was a big local tycoon. She could casually take out those mutated plants from her body and take them out. That should be a sky-high price, right? Thinking about it, she was also a person with a net worth of millions of nuclei. His mood instantly improved. After walking around, he didn't see any outstanding plants. All of them were of little value. Some of them weren't even worth much, but their prices were very high. After looking around, Xiaoqing was ready to leave. Because there were no mutant plants that she was interested in, it would be a waste of time to stay. Kai Ying looked at Yin Qiue for a long time, but she didn't say anything. Thinking that Yin Qiue didn't have enough crystal nuclei, Kai Ying secretly glanced at Yin Qiue and said enthusiastically, "Sister Qing, do you have any mutated plants that you like? You can tell me. We've been through thick and thin together. I'll buy them for you as a thank you gift for taking care of me along the way." Xiaoqing shook her head. "I don't like any of these plants. They don't suit me." The seller in the shop knew Kai Ying and knew that she was a fair, rich, and beautiful woman. He didn't want to lose this deal, so he hurriedly said, "Don't go. We have more mutated plants in our shop. If you don't like any of them, you can come inside with me. There are some new ones inside, and they're better than those outside." Xiaoqing waved her hand. She was now at level 4, and she had 4 mutated plants. Besides, she didn't want to change them. She just wanted to watch the show, so she didn't want to waste any more time here. It was better to go to other shops. Chapter 185. Kai Ying thought she didn't want to spend money, so he pushed her to the second floor. There were more mutant plants on the second floor. Some of them were similar to the plants below, and some of them were species that had never been seen below. The seller went to the innermost part, where there was a row of mutant plants. Just by looking at the appearance, it was better than the ones outside. The seller said enthusiastically, "These are all caught by the mercenary group that cooperates with our shop. Look at this one. It is a mutation of the Nepenthes. Not only can it kill small mutant animals, but it can also kill level 1 zombies. But when the zombies are dense, you can't release it, because it can simulate the smell of blood, which can easily attract a large number of zombies." Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment. Wasn't this a mutant plant similar to her man-eating flower? But the effect was a little worse. This Nepenthes could only attract zombies or mutant animals by its smell. It was very likely to be self-defeating and then be killed by the zombies that surrounded it. Her man-eating flower not only had a better effect, but more importantly, it could also move and kill zombies. It could even eat paranormals. Her man-eating flower was obviously better than this Nepenthes, so Xiaoqing directly shook her head, indicating that she didn't like it. The seller had to point to the next mutant plant and said, "Look at this one, spring flower. It can emit a kind of fragrance that can make zombies temporarily lose their sense of smell. It is very suitable for escaping when surrounded by zombies." Its fragrance also has a certain effect on paranormals, but it is certainly not as good as the effect on zombies. How long does the effect last? Xiao Qing went straight to the point, and the seller said a little awkwardly, about half a minute, I guess. Xiao Qing immediately looked away. 30 seconds. If she was surrounded by a large number of zombies, she couldn't escape at all. If the number of zombies was small, she could deal with it alone, so it was completely useless. The seller touched his nose and continued, if you are not interested, you can take a look at this. This is a blood vine. The strength of its entanglement can break the neck of an average person. It is similar to the strength of a python. Xiao Qing had her own vines, and they were poisonous. They were much more effective than this thing, so she continued to shake her head. After introducing a few more varieties, the seller became a little impatient. In his opinion, these mutated plants were all good, but Xiao Qing kept shaking her head as if she didn't care about any of them. Either her standards were too high, or she couldn't afford the price. Even Kai Yingying said, if you're interested, just tell me. I'll pay for it. Xiao Qing said indifferently, it's not that I don't like it, but the mutated plants here are not as good as the ones I have. To put it bluntly, the level of the mutated plants here was too low for her. The seller changed from embarrassment to annoyance. His shop was quite famous in Jingdu. He had all kinds of low-level, mid-level, and high-level mutated plants. Many wood paranormals were his regular customers. Xiao Qing's words pulled down the level of his shop. It would be strange if he didn't get angry. The seller didn't even care about Kai Yingying's face. After all, his backer was no worse than Kai Yingying. He immediately said sarcastically, our shop is too low level. It's normal that you don't like it. You are at least a level 4 paranormal, right? Xiao Qing said seriously, I don't mean to belittle your shop. It's just that there are no mutated plants that I need here. I have almost all the plants you mentioned, and their effects are slightly stronger than yours. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.